Good evening. Calling the meeting to order. Welcome to the October 16, 2017 meeting of the Gaston County Board of Education. I'm Kevin Collier, the chairman, and to my left is Mr. Jeff Ramsey, the vice chair, and I'm going to start at the end and let the board members tell you their name and the townships they represent.
The South Point Township.
Catherine Roberts, Dallas Township.
Doc Guthrie, Gastonia Township.
Brett Moore, Travis Mountain Township.
Thank you, and on behalf of the board, I'd like to welcome everyone here this evening. And at this point, I'd like to have our prayer and pledge of allegiance. We'll start with the invocation with Ms. Guthrie.
Let us pray. Dear Father, gracious Father, our hearts are so filled with thanksgiving this evening because once again you have given us the great honor and a blessing to assemble this evening to plan, to do those things for our children to enhance their education. And for that, Father, we are so grateful and we say thank you. Whatever is said this evening, Father, whatever is presented, let it be received well so that it may benefit our children. We are so grateful, Father, that you have allowed us to once again have the privilege of meeting with parents at the end of our first 9 weeks period. Those things that need to be strengthened, Father, we ask that we have time to do that so that our children will feel successful in the classrooms. We bless and we thank you for the parents who work with the teachers in our county to make Gaston County Schools the very best that it can be. We ask that you continue to bless the board. And Father, we ask that you bless the leader of this district. Empower him with your wisdom and knowledge so that we may go forth in your name. We ask it all in the name of your precious Son, Jesus. Amen.
Okay. Mr. Booker, I think we have someone special for the Pledge of Allegiance tonight.
Thank you. We are pleased to have with us tonight the proudest kid in Gaston County. Good to see you again, Brandon. Brandon Moss is a student at Tryon Elementary School, and he will lead us in the pledge. If we could all rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Stand right there because I think Mr. Moore's got something for you.
I want to thank you for doing that. We got you this pen from the Gaston County Board of Education. Thank you so much, buddy. And Brandon, if you can hang around a little bit, we get some good news in about 5 minutes. I want to talk about you some more, okay? Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Booker. The next item on our agenda is to adopt the agenda. I'll need a motion by Mr. Ramsey, second by Ms. Cherry. Any questions, discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor show by raising your hand, and it's unanimous. Next item, Mr. Booker, good news.
Yes, sir. Brandon, now you're up again. It wasn't even that long. We have several good news items, but I wanted to start with Brandon Moss from Tryon Elementary School. Several of us were in attendance last April when he was recognized as the proudest kid in Gaston County after writing an essay about why he loves living in Gaston County. The contest is developed by the school system and Gaston together, and it gives the winner a framed certificate and money towards a trip to Raleigh to meet with our county's legislative delegation. This summer, Brandon and his family traveled to Raleigh, and they spent time with Senator Kathy Harrington. Brandon is the son of Mr. and Mrs. Jeffrey Moss, and we're so proud of him and all that he has done, and we know that he has a bright future ahead of him.
Mr. Booker, I may have typed Brandon on your sheet, but it's Brave.
Brave.
I hope I did that.
Certificate is spelled right. Thank you so much. Thanks again, Braden. One of the great things about Gaston County Schools is we are part of the community, and our community supports us in many ways. And we wanted to take time to recognize one of those partners tonight. Each year, Rankin Lake Baptist Church hosts a teacher appreciation breakfast for teachers and staff at the 6 schools that are in the Dallas area. This year was the 13th annual breakfast. It began in 2005 with the building of the church's Family Life Center, and each summer the church members spend time collecting gifts and planning for the event. Many of our local businesses contribute door prizes to it. They recognize teachers and staff from Carr Elementary, Costner Elementary, W.C. Friday Middle, Highland School of Technology, North Gaston High School, and Woodhill for the outstanding work they do with their children. We wanted to recognize them tonight, one, for the long-serving standards that they've done for us, but also that they represent what is so great about this community and the many faith organizations that provide support throughout the year. So tonight, representing them are Reverend Jim Loftus and his wife, Delane, who is a longtime member of our finance department. So tonight, on behalf of the 6 schools that enjoy the back-to-school breakfast every year, we want to express our appreciation to the members of Rankin Lake Baptist Church for their continued support of our teachers and our schools. Next, I would like to recognize a very special group, and I'm going to ask them if they would go to the trouble of coming forward as I call their names out. Make sure I got it right since I'm off to a roaring start. Catherine Larvier. How close was that? Great. See, Todd, I can learn. Pam Barr, Nancy Caldwell-Baker, Stacy Watson. Is Eddie here? Eddie Burgess? Great. Anka Maga, Linda Gaster, Megan Lefevers, Jennifer McBee. Carrie, do you join them, please? Did I miss anyone? Great. What you have before us is the Gaston County Schools Advisory Board for Children with Disabilities. This group is known as ABCD and works hand in hand with the Department for Exceptional Children to provide learning opportunities and support for parents of students with disabilities. They are constantly sharing ideas about how to best meet the needs of our students. We would like to thank each of you for the service you provide to the ABCD group and for the work you do to support our students. Our system is better because of you, and we sincerely appreciate all of your efforts. Board, you'll be familiar with the calendar that they're responsible for producing, as well as just giving feedback, and their meetings that they have are always informative, and they allow us that connection with the community on a broader base. And so we wanted to take time to thank them for what they're doing and to recognize the vital role they play in our school system. Sean, you're going to direct us around.
The ones in the front,
I'm kind of in the middle.
the ones in the front, if you could,
Picture.
there you go.
Can you see us?
And one more. Thank you.
If you all wouldn't mind going around and shaking the board's hand so they can say thank you. Appreciate it so much. Mr. Chair, members of the board, in a few moments, you'll have a classroom moment, and that reflects the work of this group and the support they give, because we are empowered to look at opportunities in our community to serve the whole community, and I think you're going to be really impressed with that classroom moment. There are a lot of great things going on in our schools, but in the interest of time, I will stop there with the good news, Mr. Trout.
Thank you, Mr. Booker. The next item on our agenda is public expression. Before we begin, I'd like to make some comments and make sure I outline the rules and procedures for public expression. Citizens wishing to make comment and have completed a request to speak form will be recognized by the chair and then requested to step to the microphone right beside Mr. Dedman here for their comments. I'd ask for you to please state your name and address for the record, and comments will be limited to 3 minutes. The members of the Board of Education do not respond to public expression during public expression. Public expression does not allow for comments on confidential or personnel matters. The chair shall rule on all points of expression, on all points during the public expression. Now, the board secretary handed me a list of papers, and I apologize if I got them out of a certain order, but the first speaker I have is Miss Peggy Pruitt.
I have some handouts. Can I pass those? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm gonna keep part of this. Sorry about that. Okay, we're good? I actually have about 3 and,
Button's pressed. She's ready to go. Miss,
Yeah.
you're good.
okay. Okay. I actually have about 3.5 minutes worth. Is that okay if I go a little over? Okay. Okay. My name is Peggy Pruitt. I live at 671 Dallas Spencer Mountain Road in Dallas, North Carolina. Recently, due to a new interpretation, volunteers were lumped into the Employee Policy Code 7105. This policy, by its own wording, is intended to establish uniform practices and govern the employment of relatives in the workplace. One of the general requirements and prohibitions of this policy states employees shall not be placed into a position directly supervised by the employee's relative. According to Webster, an employee is a person who is hired to perform a service for wages or salary, and a volunteer is a person who does work without getting paid. But let's bring the definitions a little closer to home. In the North Carolina Public Schools Benefits and Employment Manual that I passed out, the State Board of Education goes to great lengths to define its several employees. In Policy 1-1, beginning on page 4, the state defines permanent, part-time, full-time, temporary, interim, including return-to-work retired teachers, instructional personnel, and substitute employees. Each definition lists the certain stipulations that need to be met in order for that person to qualify as that employee. Then, in section 1.1.9, they define the volunteer. It states a volunteer is an individual who volunteers of his or her own free will, does not receive and does not expect to receive compensation, and provides services which would normally be provided by an unpaid volunteer. The very next sentence says, volunteering is not employment. So since Employment Policy 7105 governs the employment of relatives, and by the North Carolina Board of Education definition, the volunteer does not qualify for any of the several employee classifications, this recent interpretation to include volunteers into this policy is an obvious misinterpretation. There are several types of volunteers: classroom, mentor, athletic, and other, but whatever you call us, we are still North Carolina Board of Education defined unpaid volunteers. Now, in Gaston County's School Volunteer Policy, Code 5010, there are no stipulations as to whom the volunteers can help, nor in which capacity they can help. There's no nepotism clause in the policy 5010. Most volunteers, myself included, consider it an honor and a privilege to serve the kids, teachers, coaches, and schools of Gaston County. To apply any employee policy to a volunteer is not only wrong by definition, but an injustice to the teachers, coaches, and especially the children in the classroom and on the sports team. They deserve the extra time and attention any volunteer can give. We cannot start redefining words of a policy. If a new policy needs to be written, then as the elected Board of Education members, it's your responsibility to do so. But until then, the current policies do not support the interpretation applied to our county volunteers, and they need to be able to continue their volunteer work as they have in the past. Okay. The ramifications of the current interpretation would be devastating to many teachers who utilize family member volunteers on a weekly basis and could prove detrimental in some athletic situations where you have family member volunteers helping teach proper technique to avoid injury, doing language interpretation for clearer instruction, or even cases of adequate supervision and coaching at the athletes at certain sporting events. William Penn said it best when he said, "Right is right even if everyone is against it, and wrong is wrong even if everyone is for it." This current interpretation of Employee Policy 7105, as it includes volunteers, is wrong. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next speaker that I have is Mr. Michael Meeks, Sr.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael Meeks Sr. I'm chairman of the Gaston County Veterans Council at 812 West Virginia Avenue, Bessemer City. My complaint is that we asked a member of the Gaston County School employee last June that we needed 3 high school bands in the parade this year. We do a survey after the parade, and most parents will say that we should have more bands in. So I made the request last June. I was told 3 days ago, or last week. First, I had to make an appointment to talk to the gentleman. I made the appointment. Then he called me the secretary called the same day and said he could meet with me then. Well, I'm at the VA hospital taking a patient, and I couldn't meet with the guy. So when I come back, I called his office to meet with him. He put it off again. So if we can't get 3 bands, then I can go out of the county and get 3 bands. Now, another thing that the Veterans Council does and the Gaston County Honor Guard, we donate money to 4 schools in Bessemer City. Every year we donate over $2,000 in school supplies. Now, if I can't get 3 bands, then we can cut the donation off. I mean, it's just that simple. Doesn't make any sense. I just had a middle school, the central school just called me wanting the flag. The flag is raggedy. If the school board can't buy the flag, they come to us to buy stuff. And the thing is that we want 3 bands, we're gonna have them if we have to go out to county and get them. And I would like for somebody to follow up with me on that. And here's my card. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Ms. Elizabeth Holcomb.
Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Holcomb, and I reside at 728 Hovis Road, Stanley, North Carolina. I would like to discuss the athletic department at East Gaston High School. A school cannot be successful without partnership with administration, staff, students, parents, and the community. While academics are and should always be first priority, athletics and the arts come second. Students tend to thrive academically when their passions outside of the classroom are being met, and I can personally speak on athletics. Expectations are needed in athletics just as in the classroom. When those expectations are not being met, the athlete is dealt with. Shouldn't this also be the case for administration and coaches? We as parents expect the same from administration and coaches. They should help them succeed and not show up to do the bare minimum if they show up at all. It shouldn't matter if we have a staff member with no experience that wants the job, or if we have a community member with experience who is willing to volunteer their personal time to coach. It shouldn't matter if they are related to the head coach or not. The position should go to the most qualified person, and administration should support them in any way they can. Our teachers are held accountable when their students do not achieve certain goals. Why are we not holding administration and coaches to the same level of accountability? Athletics or the arts may be a student's only means to attend college, therefore they need our support. Athletics or the arts may be a student's only time away from a troubled home, therefore they need our support. While I'm personally here for East Gaston, our issues pertain to the entire county. We all love the towns we live in and want consistency countywide, showing the same support for all athletic departments. We ask that you look at the athletic department at East Gaston and see that it is not getting the support it deserves, and something needs to be done sooner rather than later. There are many here tonight that may not want to speak, but are here in support of East Gaston. Will you please raise your hands? So the board can see how many there are. We love our warriors and our school, and we're ready for a change. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Eric Norman.
Hello, I'm Eric Norman, 1505 Lauren Alexis Court, Dallas, North Carolina. Did you say I had to push something?
No, it's right, it's going.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I'm here to speak on policy code 7105. On a personal level, I'm a volunteer at North Gaston and WC Friday. I help with the announcing booth, football on Friday nights at North Gaston, and we work with the middle school at WC Friday. I still stayed there. Good friends with both coaches, and I'm trying to last as long as they do. But at the end of the day, I can't do this forever. We've lost countless volunteers through our programs, a phone call away, and we lose guys. We have certain family members that we have managed to attain through the years, and they're very valuable to us. But anyway, at the end of the day, it all boils down to a volunteer. If I'm going to volunteer, I'm probably going to volunteer for very good friends or family. And Mr. Duncan referred to us as employees, and I guess it kind of offended me that at the end of the day, I consider myself a valued volunteer, and making me a worthless employee I find kind of offensive. But anyway, that's all I have, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker I have is Miss Linda Ritter.
I'm Linda Ritter. My address is 204 Tinkham Trail in Cramerton. I am here this evening to raise my concerns over Gaston County Schools' lack of sibling policy for their magnet programs. I know in the past many parents have shared the same concern and spoken at the board meetings and signed a petition. This group of concerned parents primarily had children at Hawks Nest STEAM Academy. I too have a second grader at Hawks Nest, but I also have an AIG student now at the Pleasant Ridge Academy. I have spoken with many other parents at Pleasant Ridge who support this policy change as well, and I can assure you that our base of supporters will only grow with each magnet program the county rolls out. Last January, Linda McDuffie, who's also a concerned parent and speaking tonight as well, prepared great comparative information on North Carolina's sibling policies and presented that research to the board. For the benefit of those who do not recall that presentation or didn't have the benefit of hearing it, here are just a couple of the highlights. Gaston County is one of the only North Carolina counties with an elementary magnet program that does not have a sibling policy. According to John Loeffner at the Magnet Schools of America, which is a leading informational source on public school magnet programs, sibling policies are a best practice and a standard. Why? Because sibling policies directly support one of the organization's 5 pillars of a successful magnet program, which is family and community partnerships. Despite all the time invested by Ms. McDuffie and others in preparing this information, we have never had any open dialogue with the board or its curriculum committee. Open dialogue has been discussed and even promised on several occasions, the last of which was the February 20th board meeting. So I can only venture to guess why the board has put off that discussion. My guess will be because you prefer to wait till we have more elementary magnet programs. But my question to you is, what would be that magic number of programs? Is it 3 or 4 programs, 10 programs? We can continue to offer as many magnet options as we can, but if the policy continues to make it difficult for parents to take advantage of those options, then what is the point? This issue will not go away and will more likely grow with each year and with each program that gets rolled out. So why wait? We are not asking for anything out of the ordinary. We are asking the board to consider a policy change because it is a proven best practice. Additionally, the adoption of a sibling policy will only help our magnet program succeed. I know many families who have turned down the 2 programs because it would split their young children between schools. As any parent would, we want the best elementary school experience for our children. Having our children split between 2 schools isn't the elementary school experience that my husband and I wanted for our family or that we had as children. On behalf of the nearly 200 other parents who signed a petition along with us last year, I'm asking the board to establish a sibling policy that supports the families of Gaston County and its schools. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Mason Price.
How y'all doing? Trying to clear my voice. Sorry about that. First of all, I want to say this right here. Anybody who is an
I hate to
educator-
interrupt you, but if you'll state your address for the record.
Okay. My name is Mason Price, and my address is 212 Austin Field Court, Mount Holly, North Carolina, 28120. We good? Yeah, it's the first time, sorry. I'm here to discuss a concern for the parents and the communities at East Gaston High School athletics. I want to, first and foremost, I want to say this right here. Anybody who's an educator, a volunteer, coach, teacher, police officers, I think all of them, you got to give credit for what they do, because everybody sacrifices their time and, energy. So I don't want to, have a complaint as if, people are not doing their job and doing the best that they possibly can, So, that's the first thing I wanted to say to any and everybody. Currently, there is a petition out that was written by the community that has 381 signatures. And it started, don't remember, no, it was a few days ago, which obviously there's some type of concern. I think there's a lack of accountability somewhere along the lines, as far as Miss another person stated. I can't state names that if teachers don't have their students, reach a certain grade, or their test scores are low, or whatever the case may be, there's an accountability, maybe a performance plan, or whatever the case may be, and they're held accountable. Athletics is the same. When I grew up, that's all I had. Okay, my family didn't have any money. That's how I paid my way through college. I learned a lot of my work ethic from the field, from repetition and all that, and I just took it into the classroom, and I use that as my study skills also. So that's why athletics is so passionate to me, because there is a child out there that can reach higher success and can learn it through coaches. Coaches are mentors just as well as teachers are. They, sometimes if a child didn't have a father or a mother, that is their father or mother. And I just, something has to be done. I don't want to get into the nitty gritty about what it is and pinpoint anything. Have great support from the principal, I will say that. But, something just has to be done. Some of the issues, kids going to other schools, looking for a better opportunity to go to college because of the program. I have 3 children, so for me, it's a little tough if I have 3 kids going to 3 separate high schools, not to mention they have grown up in a certain area with other kids, I don't want to separate them, from their social surroundings. So I just hope that something can be done, some type of consideration, some type of open dialogue. But like I said, thank you. Okay, so like I said, educators, you do a great job. You sacrifice your time, you sacrifice everything, and that cannot be, overlooked. But I just feel like if we can do something about it, be very happy, and I think the community would be happy. Thank you for your time. Sorry.
All right, thank you. All right, the next speaker I have signed up is Miss Linda McDuffie.
Good evening, Gaston County School Board, Mr. Booker. My name is Linda McDuffie, 102 Muirwood Road, Belmont. Our parents' sibling policy group has been in attendance at school board meetings for over a year now, in which we have consistently asked for a time and space to understand Gaston County Schools' position on magnet attendance policies and why these policies are contrary to every other North Carolina school system, only to be told that attendance procedures will be reviewed as choice options expand. At February 20th board meeting, curriculum and instructions report was clear. Gaston County is not prepared and not ready to make changes to the attendance criteria for magnet schools. However, with the expansion of programs to include Pleasant Ridge in August, our understanding was that processes would indeed be reviewed in late fall, only to be told most recently that there are no future plans to discuss magnet policies. It is unfortunate and disappointing that after sustained parental support surrounding this issue, leadership chooses to ignore the very voices that support it. Whether it's 1 magnet, 2 magnets, or 20 magnets is irrelevant. Ignoring the integral connection between school success and family involvement is a mistake. None of us live in a vacuum. Sibling policies go hand in hand with magnet schools because they support programs and families, as evidenced by all the other North Carolina systems that have inclusive sibling policies. Parents are frustrated. I know I'm one of them. They want to share their resources to support these new and engaging programs. However, when they also, at the same time, feel ignored and misled by their elected representatives, patience, energy, and support wane. The collective actions of this board and leadership regarding this issue suggest our voices don't matter. the very voices that support our schools and elect you. Again, the question is, and continues to be, when will this board be prepared to discuss and set a much-needed sibling policy? Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker I have is Miss Beverly, is it Gleber? Gleber, I'm sorry.
My name is Beverly Gleber of 407 Ridge Street, Stanley, North Carolina. I'm here to talk about the athletic program at East Gaston. As a parent and a volunteer for ever since my child was in elementary, I'm frustrated with their program because every time I try to volunteer, I get a door slammed in my face. And the kids are the ones suffering because I don't think that East Gaston's athletic program is equal to everybody else's. I'm not going to say anything about what sport, but the sport that my child is in, all the other sport schools in that county, they get privileges that my child don't get the same privilege to do. And when we ask the athletic program, why aren't our kids getting the same rights? They'll tell us, oh, well, it's the school board policy. The school board is not letting them do it. So I get frustrated as a parent because I see the other kids are able to do that, but my kid is not. And I don't think it's fair. So I think that y'all need to look into the athletic program at East Gaston, because it's not just one sport, it's a lot of the sports there at East Gaston. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Lulato, this is all that I have signed up. Did I miss anybody? Okay. Thank you, and that concludes public expression. And we will move to the next item on our agenda, which is the approval and correction of the minutes. We have July 17th, August the 7th, and August the 21st, and we'll approve all those in one motion. Motion by Ms. Cherry, second by Ms. Guthrie. Any questions or corrections? Seeing none, all those in favor show by raising your hand. And that's unanimous. The next item is classroom moment. Dr. Balknight.
I'll ask Ms. Minnick and her group to come up. Good evening, Chairman Collier, Superintendent Booker, and members of our Board of Education. We had a great summer experience for our exceptional children this summer, and you'll also hear that we invited students from other counties. At this time, I will turn it over to Ms. Minnick to introduce her team. Carrie is our Executive Director of Exceptional Children. Ms. Minnick.
Hi, I am really excited to be with you guys tonight because not only do I get to work with this wonderful group of parents who puts children first every day, and not just their own children, but all of the children in Gaston County Schools. They're wonderful advocates for them, but I have a wonderful staff that does the same thing, and they put children first every day, and they work hard to find very unique, different ways to do that. And you are going to get to hear about one of them tonight. So I am going to turn it over to Jennifer Hamrick, who's one of my program facilitators.
Thank you, Board, this evening for this honor. I am so excited to introduce to you two of the best teachers for the blind and visually impaired you will find in this country, Cindy Queen and David Passetti, who created an opportunity this summer, uniting multiple counties and fulfilling a need that has been longstanding.
What do I press to make it? Like, oh, just, no, okay. So we created a camp called Gaining My Independence, and on our first slide, we had a quote that says, "No, I may not be physically alone, but mentally there is no one else in sight." Our camp serves students who are blind. Often our students are the only students with blindness in their school. They rarely, if ever, get to see students they identify with. Our program is a way to bring them together to discuss the unique issues they have and to work on the unique skills that they need. The students our program serves, they're the ones who are learning life skills through what's called the expanded core curriculum. What the expanded core curriculum is, it's a specialized instruction solely for the low vision and blind. It covers 9 areas, but some of the areas are things like assistive technology, like the Braille writer, using a screen reader with a computer, or using an abacus for math. It also covers orientation mobility, that teaches them to use a mobility cane, compensatory skills, such as learning Braille or reading tactile graphics. It teaches them social interaction and also self-advocacy, because our students are expected not only to learn the curriculum, but to be able to speak up about their visual impairment and how it affects them, as well as ask for the things that they need. Also, all the students in our program were primarily Braille readers, and they're students who participate in the general education or occupational curriculum. The goals for our program are that students will learn independent life skills to help them navigate in their community. Some of these skills are things like cooking, cleaning, shopping. As they get older, it'd be things like paying bills. Also, they're learning interpersonal and job skills, such as self-advocacy or organizational skills. Organizational skills are a lot more important if you can't see, because if you misplace something, it takes a lot longer to find it. Also, the other thing that we really work a lot on is how to interact with the sighted world. Our world is set up for those with vision, and so learning how to navigate in that world takes a lot of special skills. Things that we talked about were how to approach a group socially, or asking or refusing a sighted person's help. So some of the things we are able to do, as I said before, this is many of these students' only chance to interact with another child who are blind. We were able to pull children from 5 different counties to come to Gaston County, to North Gaston, for our program. They got to interact not only with children, but also with adults. They got to, the 2 adults that we had that were volunteers were Gary Ray and Dale Leeser. Gary Ray, in the past, has been the head of the Library for the Blind for North Carolina, as well as the head of the National Federation for the Blind, the North Carolina chapter. Dale Leeser taught music and now composes music. They were able to talk to them about issues that they face, that the students are going to face as they get older and in the adult world. So, and in the picture, the students made a snack and they're actually sharing it with Mr. Gary. In addition to meeting with adults, they also got to meet with 2 high school students with visual impairments. Both of the students attend North Gaston. Their names are Justin Buchanan and Lauren Ruff. They were able to come and talk to our campers about issues that they might face as they get older, like in middle school and high school. Because things like when you're blind, entering the cafeteria and figuring out where to sit, or even figuring out where your friends are, is a unique challenge. They were valuable not just as role models, but also for their different perspectives. Every day, our children worked on Braille reading skills, Braille writing skills, cooking skills, recreational skills, social skills, and math and science skills. And in the picture, one of our children is working with a volunteer on measuring in the kitchen. We also got to have fun. We played modified versions of cornhole, bingo, card games, and board games. Part of the goal of our program is to show our students some of the activities that they can participate in with just a few adaptations. Often the adaptations are easier than we think. So we also play Braille Twister and red light, green light with our canes, and we learned the cane cha-cha slide. And you can see in the bottom picture, that's us doing the cha-cha slide in North Gaston's cafeteria. Our plans for the future. Our goal for the future is to grow into an annual summer institute serving Gaston and the surrounding counties. We want to make sure that children who are blind in our area have an opportunity to experience skill-specific activities to learn independence. And last, we just want to be able to say we're grateful and fortunate to be able to present in front of the school board and in front of everyone else today. We also want to thank Gaston County Schools, our volunteers, the Lincolnton High School Beta Club. This was the first year of our camp, and we were fortunate that we were adopted by their Beta Club. And we look forward to being adopted by other organizations in years to come. Finally, we wanted to thank Department for Exceptional Children and the principal and staff at North Gaston High School, who were nice enough to let us use their foods lab. So, and this is a picture of all of us at the camp, and that's it. We thank you for your time, and our shirts. So,
Show them your shirts.
oh, yeah, this is our,
And they're home designed. We
Our
designed them.
leader
But they're
for
actually
shirts.
brailled on the back. They're raised on the back, so you can.
We did design.
So, thank you very much.
Don't go anywhere. Whoa. Members of the board, you need to applaud these two teacher leaders one more time, because this was a program that was about to die on the vine, because another county lost support for this, and these two teacher leaders stepped up and said, may we do this? And they took charge of it and did it all, and they are correct to support North Gaston High School and the staff there who opened the doors and gave them great support. It was just a privilege to be in that camp and see the work that was going on. So we should really give them a standing ovation. And I look forward to seeing the great things you have planned for this summer. Thank you.
You are invited.
All right, Ms. Guthrie?
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to say thank you to the two teachers that presented tonight. And I want to also say that you have such a caring spirit. And I heard you say that you brought students in from other counties, but did you have parental involvement as well at any time so as to reinforce some of the things that you were doing during your day camp?
We did have some. Our goal in the future is to expand out, like have a day where we present maybe at the end of our camp what the kids have done and how, so that they can take some of the skills and they can take them home. As it was in the last day, the kids were able to make some snacks for their parents. And so that when we did our rewards presentation, the parents could come and eat the things that the kids made. And also we were able to present them with little journals that they had done in Braille and that they had decorated with like tackling designs.
Thank you.
No more questions or comments? Okay. Thank you very much for that information and presentation. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is Capital Needs Committee Report. Mr. Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As this board knows, the four previous operational committee members, so Mr. Moore, Mr. Debney, Mr. Ramsey, and myself, were tasked with the Gaston County capital needs bond that the commissioners brought to us. And I want to highlight something that a local newspaper did a report that $34 million from the previous 2007 bonds was squandered. What they failed to report was that was a mutual agreed upon decision between this board and that board for a better deal. The better deal, for those that don't know, was a capital needs bond that is a 1/4 cent sales tax that would generate a revenue of about $200 million, or cover or generate a revenue of about $200 million. That'll be on our May primary ballot for Gaston County to vote on. And so in this committee that we've been doing, we have leaders from across our county that have been meeting, representing each township. In last Wednesday's meeting, they finally just drilled down in our meeting and said, bring us $200 to $250 million worth of capital needs that you can have some evidence-based need for, and we will dive into that and support that. So the operations team here at the school system came back. They've done that. I'm going to pass around a sheet. There's not enough there for everybody, so if you can kind of share and look on until after this meeting, and then I'll make sure that we get you a couple more. What they come up with is We are currently building, or have slated to build Belmont Middle School as a replacement, and that'll happen either after the passing of the bonds or no later than 2019, as guaranteed by the commissioners. But in addition, that group has come up with building an additional middle school to be determined and a new elementary school for Gaston County to be determined. In addition to that, there's $25 million that'll be set aside to look at classroom additions, media center expansion and renovations, and cafeteria expansions and renovations. And then you'll see on the sheet that it also includes repair and maintenance by townships, each township being represented there from $5 million to $39 million, the $39 million being the Gastonia Township, which is larger than the rest. As we move forward this Wednesday and then up until we present a resolution for this board to pass to give to the county commissioners, we'll drill down into the finites of what we listed on this sheet that totals about $250 million. At the last meeting, I asked the county manager, Mr. Earl Mathers, to give us an idea of the allotment of those funds. We know that bonds are a 7-year bond, extendable up for another 3 years, so they can be a maximum of a 10-year bond. If you look at numbers like that, you're looking at $50 million at 2.5 years. But according to Mr. Mathers, they have a committee or a group that they work with that will tell them what their debt services can task and can be tasked with. But with this being a quarter-cent sales tax, my presumption is that we're probably looking at about a $50 million over 2.5 years, or every 2.5 years. Obviously, with the new school build, that's $40 million. So we're gonna take a big chunk of that. So hopefully, in that we can massage that a little bit. Our goal is that we touch each township in each phase, so that we're not loaded one way or the other. So that's the next part that committee is working on. With that being said, the last question that was asked at the meeting was, is it possible to go for a half-cent sales tax to take that from a $200 million to a $400 million? Because for this board, which already knows, if we include central office and administrative buildings in our needs, we're approaching at about a $630 million, give or take, need. The answer that we were given by county commissioners was because the legislation is in a short session, that they would all have to agree, all of our delegates would have to agree on it, and with it being a short session, there's no way that we could get that approved in time to get them a resolution and get it on the bond. So therefore, we're going to be at a quarter-cent sales tax, and we'll just negotiate from there out. So that's it for that report.
Good news. Any questions for Mr. Howell or any other comments from the members serving on that committee? All right. Thank you, Mr. Howell.
Yes, sir.
Good update. The next item on the agenda is the selection process for the architect. Mr. Howell, I recognize you again.
Mr. Chair, if you recall back April, May timeframe, the current operations committee, which consisted of Mr. Moore, Mr. Ramsey, Mr. Dedman, and myself, met over off of Garrison Boulevard and interviewed a handful of architectural firms concerning Belmont Middle School and the plans for that. We were presented some outstanding presentations by all firms that were in attendance. They all had great ideas, but there was one firm that stood out above the rest that seemed to capture Gaston County Schools and captured what we believe is the essence of Belmont. It's going to be that firm that we're going to bring to you as a recommendation. It's a two-part process. So we've selected what we believe is the best candidate for the architectural firm. Now we need to allow the central office to negotiate a contract that we can agree upon as a board and then present that. So until we're able to do that, I'd like to refrain from naming who that company is in case negotiations don't go well.
Okay. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Howell. That brings us to the next item on the agenda, beginning teacher support program plan, or better known as the BTSP. This is an action item, members.
I have asked Dr. Adrian Mingo and Risa Hoyle to take some time tonight to share with you the support that we are providing for new teachers, as well as the beginning teacher support plan. Dr. Mingo. Good evening, Chairman Collier, Mr. Ramsey, Mr. Booker, and other school board members. I am passionate about our Beginning Teacher Support Program, so I am thrilled to share some information with you tonight. Why? Our purpose is so that we not only recruit, but we retain the best and the brightest. We know that our teaching profession is dwindling in its number of candidates. So once we have them here in Gaston County, our goal is to definitely have them integrate with what's most appropriate for meeting the needs of students, as well as hold on to them and grow them so that they can be the absolute best professionals that they can be for us. We offer relevant, timely, and meaningful support that comes in the form of face-to-face professional development. We also have several things online available for them, and we offer a hybrid method of support. We respond to critical feedback. Many of our beginning teachers have shared with us how classroom management seems to be one of the areas they need the most support in, so we have catered and customized our support so that we address that need. Again, retaining beginning teachers is a necessary thing that we must do. Not only are other counties across the state challenged with the same thing, but I really believe that we have the absolute best support possible, so once we get them here, we can keep them. And finally, it reduces the need for us to continue to hire new staff. It's quite expensive after we provide professional development for our beginning teachers for them to leave us and go to other places. Specifically, our first-year teachers are supported more appropriately through our TIPS program, our teacher induction process for our beginning teachers. You'll notice here that, again, we have a hybrid method of supporting them. So our teacher induction process for support, also now we have a website that has been created. So they have face-to-face support as well as a platform so that they can go get any of the information that we have to offer. Our digital notebook, which used to be a very large 3-ring binder that our beginning teachers used to transport with them from place to place, is also digital. We know that a lot of our beginning teachers that we hire now come to us with a digital perspective. They're digital natives. So much of their college coursework, they've used ebooks online. So we've provided a way for them to access this wherever they go. Our monthly sessions, we do have monthly sessions that meet their needs. Oftentimes they tell us prior to the month's particular session that they some things that they're in need of. We involve TSS, we involve curriculum instruction, we involve accountability. So although the beginning teacher support is housed in the Office of Professional Learning, we collaborate with all of the divisions across the district to make sure that we provide the most necessary support for them. We help them begin early on their professional networks. That's one of the values of them coming together face to face, because they get to meet teachers from other schools. They exchange their contact information, and they can support one another even beyond our monthly meetings. And notes of encouragement. We oftentimes send them information through courier just to let them know how much they're appreciated. Again, it gives us the opportunity to give them just a little bit more encouragement outside of our monthly sessions. We are excited by the fact that we have great news. The Office of Professional Learning has a number of initiatives that we support. So in addition to supporting beginning teachers, National Board, True North Logic, and some of the other things across the district, we've created a website that we've launched for the Office of Professional Learning. Now we're able to hang everything that we do and all the areas of support right there on one website, so you can access everything related to the Office of Professional Learning in one location. I mentioned a little bit earlier how we are very intentional about collaborating with other departments across the district. We also collaborate very closely with HR, because after our beginning teachers have spent their first year with us, they then are supported by Ms. Hoyle as beginning teachers BT2s and BT3s. So it's imperative that we start early on nurturing and developing a relationship. Most recently, they've added another arm of support that we too are very proud to be supportive of. So I'm grateful for the opportunities that we have to work with multiple departments across the district as we support our beginning teachers. Ms. Hoyle?
Good evening, Chairman Collier, members of the board, Superintendent Booker. It is my pleasure to add to what Dr. Mingo has already shared with you about our beginning teacher support program. We work directly with the beginning teachers in their second and third year and provide support through a beginning teacher support program website. Our website is linked on the new website she mentioned. It's also available through quick links on the Gaston County Schools website. Each BT throughout their years of beginning teacher process is assigned a mentor. Those mentors provide direct support at the school level. We also conduct Tips 2 and Tips 3 sessions where we provide support for those second and third year teachers where they continue the Tips process that we're also proud of. In recent days, we have started a lateral entry process, which is an additional level of support for our lateral entry teachers. It's an optional support session that they are invited to based on their grade span, where we discuss timely topics that are pertinent to them. Some things that have been most recently discussed are parent-teacher conferences, of course, just before our conference day, classroom management, and we continue to talk about procedures and how procedures are effective supports in the classroom. I would also like to talk to you for just a minute about the Beginning Teacher Support Program plan and to ask for your approval for that plan. The purpose of it is to outline the support that is required and provided to our beginning teachers. This plan includes the components that you see on the screen. There is a process for identifying the beginning teachers when they come to us in the new hire process. It also asks that we include a sound induction process that I think we can all agree we have a good handle on that TIPS program, and we're very proud of that. It includes a process for conducting beginning teacher observations and evaluations that are conducted at the school level through NESIS. It includes a process that allows us to participate in beginning teacher support program monitoring by the state and also peer review that we participate in through our regional counterparts. In the plan, it includes an area of a process of storage of BT files, again through NESIS and at the school level, and also how we transfer beginning teacher files if a beginning teacher moves between LEAs in our state. We can transfer that information when requested in writing. All the required components are addressed, and we are proud of the support that we provide because we all know that the good influence of a good teacher can never be erased. So, thank you. Do you have any questions for us?
Ms. Cherry, and then I saw Ms. Roberts.
This is to either one of you. Are our lateral teachers considered beginning teachers? Did they get the exact same training?
They do.
Okay, okay. I thought so, but I just wanted to double check.
Okay.
Ms. Roberts? I'm sorry.
Sorry, is that okay? The reason that I mentioned lateral entry specifically here is we have started offering an optional support session several times a year for beginning teachers that are also lateral entry. Because they enter the teaching profession through a little different pathway, it just provides them with an opportunity to ask questions that might be related to coursework or that might be related to licensure or something different that they haven't experienced without
Okay.
going through teaching programs.
But their second and third years, they will have a mentor?
Yes,
just like
ma'am.
Okay.
They sure do.
Thank you.
Yes.
Ms. Roberts?
I'm sure you do go over this, but I'm going to ask anyway. How often do you address our beginning teachers having websites and communication with parents?
Our monthly sessions are definitely intended for us to cover everything teacher-related. So we've done that at the beginning of the school year with their first 3 days of tips, even before they entered the classroom, which was held in August. We also did it in our September meeting, as well as our October meeting. Although our October meeting was virtual, we still planted intentional things about cautions about social media, cautions about how you communicate effectively with parents. How do you construct an email that's not offensive, that takes sort of the sting or the feeling out of it so that it does not put your parent on defense, but it speaks to a collaborative relationship. We're very intentional about how we frequently do that because oftentimes with texting and the social media aspects that our beginning teachers, especially our younger beginning teachers, something they're so often involved and engaged in, we have to make sure that we speak to them very directly. We also asked Ms. McGraw to come in and speak to our beginning teachers at the beginning of the school year as part of our first 3 days of tips. And she's also provided some information that's linked directly on our website that speaks to that as well. Yes.
Ms. Guthrie?
I wanted to ask, can you identify a school or the schools the highest number of beginning teachers?
We can certainly give you that information, and we can pull that data for you if you would like for us to do that. We have some schools that over time have more beginning teachers for a variety of reasons. And when that happens, when we have a large population, we often make an effort to go out and spend time in that school and more time with those teachers so that supports them. But that data is definitely available. I just don't have it with me.
That was the reason for my question, and at the end of the 9 weeks, I wanted to see whether or not those teachers had any difficulty, or did they ask for additional help and support based on what they are expected to do or accomplish at the end of the 9 weeks. I just want to see a measurement there. Support is so important. And we appreciate what you're doing.
Okay, this is an action item, so I'll need a motion to adopt this in a second. A motion by Mr. Ramsey, a second by Ms. Cherry. We've already had discussion. Is there any more discussion or questions? Seeing none, I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor show by raising your hand. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, the next item on the agenda is elementary literacy. Dr. Balknight.
Good evening again. I'll ask Jody Edwards, our elementary executive director, excuse me, and Aaron Selby to join me at the podium. They have our presentation for us this evening on elementary literacy. We've talked several times about our Read to Achieve legislation, also our literacy teachers, and it was requested from this board some additional information to see how those programs are doing, so they will share that with you this evening.
Good evening. We're happy to be here tonight, and again, we're going to give you an update on elementary literacy. Here with me tonight, we have Susie Bradley, who is our testing data analyst, and also Erin Selby, who is one of our curriculum facilitators. She supports our literacy teachers and M-Class Reading 3D. So we thought the best way to get started tonight is just to do a little refresher on our Read to Achieve law. In July, and Ms. McGraw, I know you're going to be proud of me tonight with this. In July 2012, North Carolina passed a part of the Excellent Public Schools Act, the North Carolina Read to Achieve law. And this legislation actually came into effect in the year 2013-2014 school year. The main goal for this law is to ensure that all students be on grade level in reading by the end of 3rd grade. There are 5 major components to this law, the first being a comprehensive literacy plan, the second being a K-3 diagnostic reading assessment, 3rd, retention of 3rd graders not performing on grade level, 4, a summer reading camp, and finally 4th grade transitional classes. We'll start with the comprehensive literacy plan. This is a plan that we're going to talk about in upcoming slides so that we can show you what does this exactly look like in Gaston County schools. The second component is the K-3 diagnostic reading assessment. The state has provided for us M-Class Reading 3D. This is an assessment for teachers where they can drill down to very specific skills for our students to help inform instruction. The third component is that component of retention of 3rd graders not performing on grade level. So how do our children meet that requirement? The first thing that the state looks at is the end of grade test for 3rd grade. Students have to be a level 3, 4, 5 to be proficient on the end of grade test. The next thing that they look at is actually they go back and they look at the beginning of grade test for 3rd graders that they took in the fall. Then there are alternate assessments throughout the year that students can pass. One previously has been STAR to score a Lexile level of 725 in reading. This year we'll be using the iReady assessment for that. They can also score a level P in M-Class Reading 3D. They also have the opportunity to complete a Read to Achieve portfolio. This portfolio is where children read passages on all the standards, and then they are assessed on those standards. After that, if they have not passed any of those, then students can actually take another retest for the end of grade test. There are also good cause exemptions for students, and these are such as limited English proficient students, students with disability, and students that have multiple retentions. The fourth component is the summer reading camp, which I think most of you are familiar with. This is really a camp that targets first, second, and third grade students, but it's primarily for our third grade students to be able to meet the Read to Achieve requirement. The state requires us to provide these students with at least 72 hours of intensive reading instruction during the summer. Here in Gaston County, we actually provide them with 4 weeks of reading instruction. The last component is the 4th grade transitional class. So let's say that a 3rd grader has gone through 3rd grade and they have not met any of the requirements. They've also gone through summer camp and they still haven't met the requirement for Read to Achieve. They will enter 4th grade as a transitional student with the label of retained reading in Power School. Those 4th graders still get all the supports that they have had previously, and they still have the opportunity to meet Read to Achieve through those alternate assessments that I mentioned before. After 4th grade, however, they have to pass an actual end-of-grade test in order for that reading label to be removed. So again, these are the five major components of Read to Achieve. So what do we do here in Gaston County Schools to help these students to meet these requirements? So we want to take you on a journey tonight to the class of 2026. Seems like it's a long way off, but it'll be here before we know it. So we thought the best way to really look at this was to look at this class. This is the first class that actually went through the entire process of Read to Achieve. These were the 1st graders that actually went to summer camp that year. So they were, again, 1st graders in 2014-15, and so we have gone back 3 years to examine this cohort. So remember, the first component of Read to Achieve is a comprehensive literacy plan. So here in Gaston County Schools, our elementary students receive every single day 120 minutes of literacy instruction. That includes direct instruction through mini lessons in reading and in writing. It includes shared and or content reading where they're integrating social studies and science, individualized and small group instruction that's differentiated to their individual needs, and this also includes a differentiated word study program for those students. Interactive intentional read-alouds, and most importantly, the model that we use in Gaston County provides students with independent reading time each and every day so they can practice their reading skills. Now, Erin Selby is going to let you know a little bit more about how our Title I students receive additional support.
Good evening. When looking at our district data, we see that our Title I schools have a large number of students who are struggling readers. And in an effort to support those struggling readers, 18 of our Title I schools are assigned a literacy teacher who uses a scripted research-based program called Leveled Literacy Intervention to instruct our students who are performing below grade level in reading. The program is funded with Title I funds, and the student selection is based on M-Class data as well as other universal screeners as well as teacher input. These are our Title I elementary schools who are assigned a literacy teacher. Our literacy teachers work with small groups of students for about 30 to 45 minutes a day, at least 4 days a week. As you can see in the pictures, our program allows for students to be engaged in intense and individualized instruction. So how effective has this program been? In the next couple of slides, you're going to see some data from this cohort that we've mentioned that have been served by a literacy teacher. Each student that enters our program is tracked from the beginning of the year until the end of the school year. This chart represents a percentage of the students in the class of 2026 cohort who received instruction from a literacy teacher, and it represents the growth that they received on their reading levels from one year to the next. As you can see, the 1st grade students ended the school year with 89% showing growth, 92% of the students showed growth by the end of 2nd grade, and 92% of 3rd grade students showed growth by the end of last year. This year, 71% of our students in the 2026 cohort entered fourth grade on grade level. So we're pretty proud of that.
Good evening. So we just looked at some data for selected students in the cohort who received support from literacy teachers. But now we're going to look at some data for the whole cohort. The expectation is that students will increase their reading level by 13 levels between first and third grade, which is a pretty rigorous expectation. This means that students who start off at a level D are expected to increase to a level P from first to third grade. For the class of 2026, the percent of students meeting grade level reading expectations at the end of each grade has continued to grow, according to the results that come from our end of year administration of M-Class Reading 3D assessments. At the end of first grade, the grade level expectation is a reading level J. There were 54.3% of students that met this expectation. At the end of second grade, the expectation is a reading level M, and we had 57.1% of students meet this expectation. By the end of third grade, the percent of students meeting the expectation of a level P increased to 69.8%. Additionally, 80% of students in this cohort increased their reading level between 10 and 20 levels from first to third grade. And the reason that we included our students who had between 10 and 12 level increases in the calculation is that those students have also made significant gains in their reading level, even though they fell a little short of the rigorous expectation of 13 level increases. So I'd like to share with you one student's individual journey. This is our student, Sally Sunshine. She started first grade below grade level reading expectations. She attended summer camp and she received explicit individualized reading instruction. From first to third grade, our students are administered 3 M-Class assessments per year, beginning of year, middle of year, and end of year. And that's a total of 9 assessments between those 3 grade levels. Sally only met grade level reading expectations on 4 out of 9 of those assessments. And this student represents one of the reasons why we wanted to look at cohort data tonight. While she didn't meet any or many of the grade level expectations on the specific assessments, over the course of 3 years, she was able to make substantial growth and ultimately met the Read to Achieve requirement with supports that are in place for our struggling readers. Since the Read to Achieve legislation was put into effect during the 13-14 school year, we have our lowest number of students that are moving to grade 4 with a transitional reading label. Our percent of transitional students continues to decrease each year, and we had a 2.4% decrease of students with a transitional reading label over last school year. And one of the biggest factors for this continued decrease is that the number of students that are meeting the Read to Achieve requirements during the actual school year continues to go up. The number of students meeting the Read to Achieve requirement during the school year in 2015 was 327, and that was increased to 484 during 2017. And by the same token, the number of transitional students in 2015 was 440 and is now only 299. So the data is showing that we're moving in the right direction with having our students meet the Read to Achieve requirements by the end of third grade. So our numbers have somewhat reversed for those 2 categories.
Ms. Roberts.
If this was mentioned, I apologize. I was trying to take notes. First of all, thank you for those growth numbers. You know, I always love the growth numbers. But with these growth numbers, are we also seeing their growth in math and other subjects as well as they improve with their literacy? Do we have data on that?
We don't have specific math data to share with you tonight, but we certainly can work with our accountability staff and get some additional math information and come back and look at a very similar presentation for math.
Yeah, I would love to see it for that cohort.
Okay.
Mr. Dedman?
I'm just curious, every school has a Title I teacher. Does that come out of our regular allotment, or do they have to pay for that out of their Title I money?
We have some set-aside funds at the district, and we have written that into our Title I plan as a district support for our Title I schools.
So if I'm a
So it's-
Title I principal, I still get to use all my Title I money for other things else, and the district gives you a Title I teacher?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Ms. Guthrie?
I just want to make sure, did you say you had 71 or 72% of the fourth grade students? And
71%.
I think that's an awesome number. It shows that your strategies are working, what you're doing, even during the summer, keeping those reading skills intact. We appreciate what you're doing there. And I know that the children are excited because you show excitement when you're sharing with us, and we greatly appreciate that. If the children can read and comprehend, be able to recall what they read, then those math scores, if there are word problems, can't help but to be enhanced or to show growth.
Yes.
Because when you read and understand what you read, it's going to show, it's going to reflect across curriculum. Thank you.
Ms. Cherry?
Dr. Balknight, what were our enrollment numbers for summer reading this year? Were they basically the same as last year?
They were actually, we had around 1,100 this year, which was really down. But the reason for that is because we had more third graders meet the Read to Achieve requirement during the school year. That's what Ms. Bradley was showing a while ago. So we had less students qualify for summer camp in third grade, which is really what we want.
Great.
Well, I've got to just brag on staff, and I know the board gets tired of hearing me talk about the old days, but there was a time when Title I money was used for principals to hire friends to come in and read to the children at the schools, or hire somebody's program. We had hodgepodge programs at different schools. And when we moved to have literacy teacher to put into those schools, that was one of the first steps. And then when we agreed that reading was a priority in the state and with this board and in this county, that these programs we put in, and what I'm most thrilled about is that we're tracking them. And we've put in so many programs without being able to really look back to know if they've made a difference down the road. I'm excited to hear that, we're not just looking at whether they're passing or failing, and we're digging into the cohort data, and that's really special to hear. We identify exactly where they need help, and that is such an improvement from where we used to be. And I just can't thank staff and everybody enough for what we're doing. And these kids, they're going to be better in the future for it. And as we look ahead, we're going to look back, and we all may not be here, but we're going to say, you know what? They were doing some good things. Thank you. Anybody else? Ms. Cherry?
On that note, can we get those charts? Because that is a very impressive thing to let our constituents know, to see this data and how it continues to go on the positive end.
Yes, ma'am, we'll share all that information in the PowerPoint that you'll receive.
Okay.
And to Mr. Collier's point, if I may add, several years ago, and prior to me being in charge of instruction, this board made the decision to support first and second grade prior to it being funded by the state. So we had a long-range vision several years ago, and we're seeing the fruits of our labor.
Mr. Dedman?
I know Mr. Collier was on the board, and I was just a principal, but I don't know anybody that hired a friend of theirs to come in and read on Title I money. So I'm defending all the principals in Title I schools, even though I wasn't.
Maybe it wasn't
You'd
a
have
friend, but they worked in a literacy
You'd have to
program.
show me
but
that
it varied.
one, okay?
It varied from school to school. Yes, thank you, Ms. Guthrie. It is tremendously better than what it was. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is Stand Up Gaston, Dr. Balknight. And you're going to make
Good evening, Board. Chairman Collier, Superintendent Booker, Dr. Parker is joining me, and several of staff from Department of Health and Human Services, and specifically the Women's Shelter. This is a great partnership that we have, and we're very thankful for our partnership. As you'll see, I see Mr. Dedman, I believe, is going to show his shirt maybe for us.
I'd be delighted to.
This is our week that we're kicking off Stand Up Gaston, and all of our freshman students, as Dr. Parker will talk about, will receive one of these shirts throughout the school year. We're very excited. We're refreshing our Rachel's Challenge campaign, and you'll hear more from Dr. Parker in her presentation. Good evening. Thank you very much for having us here for an update. We shared this information with you earlier, but we're excited that it's finally getting started. So I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce two members of our partner organization. Really, as a whole, we're working with the Department of Health and Human Services, but within that umbrella organization, there are other divisions, and so we're working more specifically with some than others. So I'd like to introduce. One up. This is Megan Buck. Megan works for the Shelter of Gaston County, which is the domestic violence shelter resource and residential center. And so she has done a lot with a curriculum that I will talk about shortly. And then I'd also like to introduce Heather Kaufman. She's working with us on our committee, and she works with the Child Advocacy Center. So she also did some other projects with me with the elementary counselors for Play It Safe program that we're doing in our 3rd grade now. So we're excited to have them as partners and helping us with things like organizing the t-shirts and different things like that. So again, we started our program today. It was very exciting, similar to what we've done in the past with Rachel's Challenge, because we want to keep that whole idea of the kindness and compassion in our schools and fostering those, safe relationships, safe schools and healthy relationships. But we definitely want to evolve that into something that's specific to Gaston County. So I'd also like to pass around, this is something that we had at our program, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but I want you all to have it. I mentioned Megan has helped train our health and PE teachers. So last year she went out to some of the schools, piloted this program, Start Talking, which is a program about helping students to have those healthy relationships, whether they be friendships, dating relationships, but we definitely want to make sure that they're thinking about how they interact with others and the impact that they have on other students throughout their day. So we are doing that in all of our health and PE classes. They have partnered with us to help provide those access codes so we can do those at the schools, and those are starting this week. So as Dr. Baltnight said, and Mr. Dedman showed you an example, that's one way we're getting this message out of Stand Up Gaston. As the students complete this curriculum, then they'll get the shirt to remind them about the fact that we want them to have these healthy relationships and safe schools. Just to remind you, here's our logo one more time of what we are promoting, and really important that we are seeking healthy relationships, talking and listening, accepting differences, never tolerating violence and abuse, getting the students to do something to help, unite to make a change, and pledge your support. And we will introduce the program in October because this is Bullying Prevention Month, but then we also will be following up and doing more pledge activities. We did meet with students, Superintendent Student Advisory, and one of the things they said is they want to see us do things throughout the year. So we're going to work on doing pledges and reminders, and we'll have some retractable banners that we'll put out throughout the school just to remind them of these concepts constantly that we're promoting Stand Up Gaston. I gave you all a card. So this is something that every student in middle and high school will receive. So we have an amazing speaker this year. We have the same speaker for all schools, and we haven't done that for several years. But he is really good, and he talks about a lot of different things. He wants them to think about their future as a whole. So he's not only looking at, we definitely promoting this anti-bullying message and safe schools and healthy relationships, but also how do you personally hope to evolve over time? So goal setting card, he's done a great job of getting some local sponsors, so he is collaborating with Walmart. So if the students complete their goals and they go into Walmart and take a picture with the sign, they can upload it on Instagram or Twitter, as the students want to do, and then there will be drawings for $100 gift cards for Walmart. So that's going to help students and families, and that will be something that will happen over time. They also can, if they complete their card, they can start working with the athletic development system, so that gives them an opportunity to think about their health and their wellness and kind of get them working out and those goals as well. So it's just a multiple opportunity for them. And just a reminder, in his presentation, he talks about how as a student athlete and as a coach and just as a person, he always sets goals for himself. And whenever he was in middle school, high school, and college, he kept those with him in his wallet. And he would refer back to them whenever he was having a situation or if he observed something in school where someone was trying to tear him down or bring him to a different level. That was his way of refocusing and reminding himself. So, and he encouraged the students to do that as well. We do have an elementary program. This is definitely a K-12 initiative. I talked to you before about the social emotional learning program that we have in the schools with Strong Start, but specific to bullying, because this is Bullying Prevention Month, there is a program. This is Lizzie Sider, for those of you who may be country music fans. She's a Nashville star, a young person who is really reaching out and sharing her own experience, and she has this whole kit that she is sharing with schools. No one has the power to ruin your day. It's really powerful so that students can realize that they're not going to give someone else power over their day. They're not going to let someone else's negative words towards them have a negative impact. And so very recently, so it's still very much in construction, but we are excited to have a vanity URL for our program now. It's called standupgaston.org, and this is where we will be uploading a lot of information. The brochures are being finalized and printed, a copy and reminder of the pledge card that the students will be doing, and then just additional information as it becomes available about supporting healthy relationships and anti-bullying. So standupgaston.org is going to be, right now I have the logo, and I'm going to add the part about what each letter stands for, but also we have another way for students and families and anyone who wants to report any concerns that they may have about bullying. We have the definition to remind them what bullying is, but then we also have the link so that if they need to make a report, and this is checked daily, so that we can share that information with the schools if it becomes necessary, so that we can make sure that we're protecting our students at all times. So that's really all the information I have to share today. Just wanted to give you an update, but I'll be happy to answer any questions as well.
Ms. Guthrie.
I wanted to, first of all, thank you for what you have done and what you are doing with our young people. You mentioned no one has the power to run your day. You mentioned that as a kid. Is that something that we could see or do within a community?
That is something that all the elementary counselors, I share that information with that. That is something that's being provided free by Lizzie Sider's organization. And so we've ordered copies of that to review so that that can be implemented with the students in elementary school.
Okay, I would love to maybe see if I can implement that into the community as well.
Sure.
As one of the youth programs. And the Walmart card, this is for high school, right?
Middle and high.
Middle and high, and they can go into Walmart, take a photo with this card, upload, and have their name placed in a drawing.
Yes.
So I just want to emphasize that too with our young people. We want to go beyond the walls of Gaston County Schools.
Right.
What we hear from you, we want to make sure that we can make it grow outside of the walls.
Absolutely.
And that's
It's
why I want
community
to get the
initiative.
information for it.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank you.
Ms. Roberts.
Did you say who the speaker was?
Sean Golden.
Sean.
And I'll add, Ms. Roberts, he is very relevant. I had the pleasure of sitting through at York Chester Middle School today, and I was having to Google names and relevant, because the kids were engaged and knew where he was. So he is speaking to them in their language and really challenging them. And he was open mic with interaction with the kids. It was really a positive thing to watch and keep those children engaged. Anybody can take on 800 middle schoolers is pretty good.
Is he going to be in place tomorrow?
He'll be at Southwest Middle School tomorrow morning,
What time?
8:30 and 9:45. So he's at Southwest.
Can we get a schedule?
I can get you a schedule, certainly,
Yeah.
absolutely. Sure.
Mr. Dedman.
Oh, I'd personally like to thank DHHS for their involvement in this. I don't know if everybody knows, but they've had a great financial involvement. I mean, this takes the place of Rachel's challenge, but thank you so much. I know that's a great thing you're all doing. We really, really appreciate it.
Mr. Howell.
I'll echo what Mr. Devon said. I think it's good whenever we have bullying campaigns that we keep fresh, and not just because we say it again, but because we make it fresh. I'm going to ask the question that I asked, I think, when it was presented the first time, maybe with the Linda Rader Center. Are we going to teach through the acronym stand up, or the it's not even an acronym, it's I'll think of it in a minute. Anyways, are we going to teach that? So when we get to the never tolerate bullying and abuse, and the D, which is do something to help. As a high school student in the 80s, that would have meant one thing to me. I'm assuming we're going to try to reiterate that means something different to high school students in 2017. So are we going to talk through that so that they know what do something is and they know what not tolerate what that means, not take the actions into your own hands by physical contact, that sort of thing. And then the second part of that question is, I know you said that on that form on the website that they can click on it, they can share that information with somebody who will get it to the administrator. Is there another set of eyes that see it before the administrator, so that if it's an administrator or a teacher that's doing the bullying presumptuously to the student, that somebody can intervene on that instead of?
Yes,
Okay.
I monitor that, so I'm the one who would see it first and would forward it to the appropriate person. So if need be, I would, staff that with Dr. Ball Knight if we needed to. But in most cases, I think it's going to be it's a lot of times students. So of course we would share that with administration so that they can act on it as quickly as possible. To get back to your question, actually that was something that came up today. And I was so proud of our students because we did Yorkchester, Belmont, and Greer presentations today. And in every one they asked, what do I do if I see bullying? And these were just questions from the students. It was something we were prepared to integrate if they didn't ask, but it was better when the question came from their peer. And so when they did, Mr. Golden did an excellent job because we had talked about fielding that, and he said, always go to the adult in the building. Still support that person. Don't let that student be isolated and add to the bullying in that way, but always report it because we don't want the students feeling like they have to go in and physically, implement that safety. So I understand what you're saying about that concern, but he did a great job of that, and we have that prepared if it doesn't come up as a question, but I've been super happy. The last 3 we did today, it came up every time.
Mr. Chair, if I can go back as a follow-up to, thank you for that answer, to the last question. Is there a way we can implement a procedural checkbox that if it is an employee, coach, something like that, that gets sent to a particular person that also is kind of an accountability thing? I guess my concern is I don't want it to, I'm not saying you would do this, so please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I just want to make sure that one, because it would be an employee, that would never happen, and that we just look at only the student-on-student incidences. Because if a 20% perception in a kid's eyes is 90% reality to them, so if they perceive it, then maybe there's something we can do different that takes away that perception or corrects the process. So if we could put some kind of checkbox in there that says, if we get this, then it goes to this next procedure.
And it sounds like, Mr. Howell, that's something easy that Dr. Parker and I can put in place.
Perfect.
We'll work through those
Perfect.
because I do understand your concern.
Right. Thank you very much.
Questions or comments? Thank you very much. This is a very important issue for this board. We stand behind what you're doing 100%. Thank you. Okay. Members of the board, the next agenda item is the presentation is going to take around 30 minutes. Want to see if y'all want to take a break or keep moving forward.
We're voting on that? Let's keep moving.
Okay. All right. With that, we're going to move to item number 13. No, I'm sorry. Item number 14, volunteer orientation. It's going to be Ms. Yatko and Mr. Duncan. And
Good evening, Chairman Collier, Vice Chairman Ramsey, members of the board, Superintendent Booker. I'm here this evening to share with you and present information concerning our volunteer procedures and protocol. And to just give you a little background, of course, over our 49 years of Gaston County School consolidated history, we have had volunteers serving our school district. And we are very, very appreciative and grateful for the support of volunteers who give time and have helped in many different capacities. But in January of 2010, we began a process that lasted almost that entire year, where a task force was convened and we evaluated best volunteer practices and procedures not only from our regional neighbors, but actually throughout the nation. We sought information on volunteer best practices. And so in the fall of 2010, the recommendations of that task force were implemented in Gaston County schools. And those are what we are currently following. Also want to mention that in the fall of 2011, the following year, we took another step forward and implemented a digital volunteer application. Prior to that year, everything was still done on paper. You can imagine it was a rather large and sometimes cumbersome process. It did exist, it was done well, but we certainly took advantage of implementing one more step forward. I'd like to share with you for a moment what you will currently see on the volunteer page for Gaston County Schools. This page shows, first of all, the definition of a Gaston County school volunteer, which a volunteer for our school district is described as a person who willingly undertakes a service of an assigned task performed within Gaston County schools and under the approval of the school administration. You'll also note here that the various volunteer categories are listed. Examples such as mentor, which I'll speak a little bit more, I'll elaborate on that in a moment. Tutors, chaperones, certainly classroom volunteers, clerical support, and other volunteer categories. To become a volunteer in our school district, the expectation is that all volunteers will go through the following procedure. To volunteer in our school district, the first thing is to submit an online volunteer application, and you can see it's easily accessible right here on the website. Each person who submits an application creates their own login and unique password to access their application. A background screening is required of all volunteers in Gaston County schools. That is automatically launched as that online application moves through the process. The first stop for that application will be the school administrator of the school that the volunteers have selected. They have the option to select any one from a drop-down menu of our schools. As the application moves forward and goes through the approval process, the volunteer will receive a confirmation email to let them know that they have been approved as a volunteer. And they'll also receive an email reminder telling them that the final step of the process for volunteers is to complete a required volunteer orientation. It's very brief. We make it available. There is a volunteer orientation session available every single week of the school year. We ask that the volunteers before their service attend the orientation, again, so that everyone hears the same clear, consistent information and any other items that they would need to know prior to their volunteer service. As you can also see on the screen, the dates are on the website. They are updated monthly. We try to schedule them on various days of the week, various times as well, to try and help accommodate the schedules of our potential volunteers. Let me get back to that. This is a screenshot of the volunteer application. It's the same standard application for all volunteers. Just some basic information is required. The schools, you can see where the volunteer may select the schools where they would like to volunteer. The volunteer activities are also there for the volunteer to check. Also included on this application is a volunteer code of conduct. And again, I will elaborate on that in just a moment, but it is there for the volunteer to not only read, but also acknowledge that they have read that. There is a place at the bottom for their electronic signature, which basically, if you can see the fine print, it says that the volunteer acknowledges the code of conduct, as well as understanding that a background screen is required on all volunteer applications. So to proceed now, I would like to just take you through the volunteer orientation that all volunteers are expected at the start of their service to attend an orientation. We do explain the reason to the volunteers why they are attending the volunteer orientation. Again, as you know, there is a Gaston School Board Policy Code that requires adequate screening and supervision of all volunteers and adequate training to make sure the volunteer is familiar with all applicable laws, with policies and procedures and school rules. This is the screen where I like to elaborate when I do have the opportunity to get in front of volunteers, some who are maybe contacting Gaston County Schools for the first time. But this is an opportunity for us to share pertinent information about the school district. Good news, I never hesitate to share our graduation rate, which we are certainly proud of this year. I also make sure that they know that as the 9th largest school district in the state, that we have ranked for the past 2 years first in safety. And I think that the parents and volunteers who attend appreciate hearing that type of information. So again, this is just an opportunity to add additional good news for those beginning their volunteer service. We then go on to elaborate on the Code of Conduct. And so there are 10 items in the Volunteer Code of Conduct, so I will go through those with you now. Of course, each volunteer is directed to check in at our main office, and we explain what does that look like. Again, because sometimes these are people coming for the first time. They may not realize that the front doors are locked and how to come into the building, how to scan their ID at the designated visitor check-in in the main office. We explain the importance of displaying that computerized badge that is generated for them as they are moving about the school. We also remind all volunteers that we ask them to be very professional, maintain confidentiality. This is a good reminder as they are working with students to remember to keep personal information or things they may become aware of as they are volunteering. Or I like to even add, sometimes students have a bad day, but we respect every child's privacy, so we do remind volunteers not to repeat those things outside of their volunteer time. Item number 4 in the Code of Conduct discusses use of photographs, again as a reminder. You can imagine 2 chaperones, of course, want to take pictures on field trips, but we actually bring up the fact that no one should be posting, that photographs are for personal use only, and if there are any other children in photographs, that they do not have the permission of the other child's parent to post on social media. That actually is a very important component as we are going through the process. Volunteers, again, are reminded not to exchange personal information with students that they come in contact with in their volunteer role, again, keeping their relationship very professional. Item number 6 in the Code of Conduct is key to our expectation of volunteers. All volunteers operate under what we say is sight, sound, and supervision of a Gaston County school staff employee. So at all times, all volunteers are responsible, and even on field trips, we remind chaperones that they should always know where the Gaston County staff employee is. Again, because that is the first person they will turn to for any in the event of emergency or any other incidents. That is where they will be instructed for the proper procedures. Item number 7 just directs volunteers to the preferred restrooms that the schools select. We also discuss when volunteers are chaperoning how to do that on field trips and so forth, and we get some specific information about that. Again, we not only invite, but insist that volunteers participate in drills at school, whether they're fire drills or emergency drills or even lockdown procedures. All volunteers are agreeing to do everything in the best personal and educational interest of every child that they come in contact with. And finally, again, reminder to maintain professionalism, respect school policies, and dress appropriately on school grounds. So again, as I shared with you a moment ago, on the online application, their electronic signature is there acknowledging the items that are required for volunteers in the Code of Conduct and also their understanding of the background screening that is performed. This slide also, again, addresses more specific things about social networking and just reminders for volunteers. We talk about the importance of checking in, but we also discuss the importance of checking out and explain how that's done. And I actually had a situation just today while I was doing an orientation where a parent who had been to the school several times already certainly knew how to check in, but just commented and said, "I didn't realize I have to check out." And so we explained that process of taking that ID badge off. There is a barcode on it. It is slid under the scanner, and so that automatically checks someone in and out. Again, as you know, those dedicated computers do several things for us. They can help log volunteer hours. They can also give emergency reports in the building. Again, I can report that parents seem to be very appreciative of some of the things that they learn and understand the policies that we are upholding for safety and protection of the students. Again, this just reiterates what I just said concerning the ID badges. We are required to say a word about sexual harassment. We were asked to include this slide in our presentation, our HR department at their direction. We use the policy code of the school board concerning sexual harassment, and you see the definition on the screen. Also, just mention the examples of that type of behavior. The one that we do draw everyone's attention to is the first bullet, that even if something is said as a humorous remark or a joke, that might be interpreted as this type of behavior, that, again, to be very, very vigilant. And then this slide is the explanation of how does this relate to volunteerism, and that is, of course, if this type of behavior presents an unreasonable interference in a student's performance, limits their ability to participate, or creates an abusive or an intimidating or a hostile environment. Volunteers are reminded that if they should be aware of this type of behavior, that they are to report it to the administrator of the school. So this was the summary of our volunteer orientation. Our expectation is all volunteers work positively for the good of the school. We suggest that all volunteers use this as an opportunity to support, praise, and encourage students. Reminder to keep their work and their information confidential, and also be considerate of the teacher's time and schedule conferences outside of volunteer time. Certainly don't make comments harmful to anyone's reputation, other volunteers, professionals, or students. Certainly don't get physical with a child or violate confidentiality. There have always come some consistent questions during our orientations concerning the application process. I would like to say here that I would very much like to compliment our Gaston County principals, because they are very supportive of this procedure. When field trips and other things arise, they are very vigilant about making sure applications are in our system and directing their volunteers to orientation. But each year, at the start of the new school year, we do ask our volunteers to reactivate that application. The application does remain in our database. At the end of the school year, we put the applications in a holding file, again, because people graduate, people move, and so we don't want to have lists of people that are no longer here. So the reactivation process is that process to give us a fresh, clean list each year. So a reminder email is sent, usually the last week of July, the beginning of August, and volunteers are asked to reactivate their volunteer application. And what that means is, using the login and the password they created, they can pull that application up. As a matter of fact, they can do that at any time during the school year to make any changes to the information on that application. A key reminder, of course, is as your child moves to a different school, when they go from elementary school to middle or middle to high school, they need to change those schools, to select those schools if that is where they would like to volunteer. So that is the reactivation process that we expect each year. We are very happy to assist folks who have forgotten their login and their password. Or who have, I also would like to say that if anyone does not have access to a computer, we are happy to assist those folks to help submit the application. Once the potential volunteer attends an orientation, we do put that orientation date on their application, so that reflects that they have completed the entire volunteer process and are ready to volunteer. A key component as well is that the volunteer assignments are made at the school level. So that is the other thing that they hear at orientation, is that even though they have completed this application and they have done all the steps and they are now an official volunteer, we still ask them to be proactive because the volunteer assignments are made at each of the schools. So the principal of every school must accept the volunteer application. So it is touched even before it comes for processing. The principal touches that volunteer. They know the names of the folks who will be volunteering in their schools or who are asking to volunteer in their schools. But we take it one step further in saying to the volunteers, be proactive. With over 3,700 applications that come each year, we ask the volunteer, if there is something you want to do, or even if you don't know what you want to do, contact that school. Talk to a teacher, talk to the office, talk to an administrator, and find out what the opportunities are. Because you can imagine, too, with between elementary, middle, and high school, the opportunities may look different from school to school. Once this process is completed, the volunteer is ready to begin, and as I said, we do ask them to check back with the school to see, and especially if they feel that they don't know what those opportunities are, we'd love for the school to be able to outline that for them. So this is the final screen of the orientation. Again, volunteers are told that Gaston County Schools appreciates the gift of time and of talent that is given to support our students and to support our staff as well. I think volunteers set a wonderful example for our children as well as they perform their volunteer tasks in the school. So that is the orientation, but I would like to also reference that we do have, as I mentioned earlier, different categories of volunteers. We do have volunteers who mentor. And mentors are volunteers who are assigned one-on-one with a student. So therefore, there needs to be a little more training and a little more time spent with those individuals. So a mentor is asked to attend additional training. They complete the volunteer application orientation, but they also are asked to attend mentor training where we then address how to conduct your mentoring sessions. Mentors are also required to have a photo mentor ID badge for obvious reasons, I believe. Because again, as that person is one-on-one with a student, our teachers know that if they see a mentoring badge, they understand why that volunteer is in the school and why that volunteer is with that one person. Again, that mentor volunteer is still under sight, sound, and supervision of a Gaston County staff employee. The other part of this that is very key to our mentoring program is that any child in the program, the parent must give permission for the child to participate with the mentor. The parent is aware of who that mentor is, and so they do give written permission for the mentor to work with the student. I'm very happy to report that last year we had over 320 volunteer mentors serving in Gaston County schools. This is a graphic that will just help demonstrate the slight difference between volunteers and mentors. As you can see, volunteers, of course, do the application, the background check, have their orientation, and their assignments are made at the school level. Mentors, in addition to those steps, must also attend another training, have parent permission, and they are assigned one-on-one. And the expectation of mentors is that they meet regularly. We like to say weekly, if that is possible for them to check in regularly. Again, you may have heard me speak in the past about the mentoring program. I am passionate about that and very, very proud of the many wonderful stories and results that have come from the mentoring program. So as you can see, we have had a proud tradition through the years of volunteerism in Gaston County schools. For the last school year, 2016-2017, we had over 3,700, that's 3,700 active volunteer applications on file. For this current school year, since August 1st, we have processed 832 new volunteer applications. We've had over 1,500 folks reactivate their volunteer applications. So as of this afternoon, when I checked before coming, there were 2,396 current approved and active volunteers for Gaston County schools. I expect by tomorrow morning that will go to 2,400. And again, we certainly appreciate, and that will rise before this year is over. Oftentimes, events and things in the schools will generate more reactivation of applications or new applications. So I totally expect that we will probably exceed that 3,700 number. So I am now going to turn it over to Mr. Duncan, who will continue the volunteer coach process.
Ms. Yadko, before you go,
Yes, sir.
we're going to let Mr. Howell ask a question while we're on those two tiers of volunteers.
Yeah, so here's my first question. It was implied at the last board meeting, our work session, that there was a tier level, if you will, of volunteers. As I'm looking at your website, and I know what policy 5010 says, and it has nothing to do with tier levels or anything else as a policy. But as I'm on your website looking at business and community partnerships, I see the categories mentor, tutor, chaperone, reading soulmate, volunteer, junior achievement, and so on and so on and so on. Is there an implied tier list? Because if I scroll down, I see, please note, mentors require an additional 1-hour training session. So within these 10, 11 plus volunteer categories, is there a tier level between all of those, or just between mentor and the other 10 to 13 that I'm counting there?
Well,
I mean,
we do not use the term tier.
Okay.
We talk about volunteers as categories. Again, all volunteers, and then as I mentioned, mentors do require an additional screening, but we don't consider that a tier or a level.
Okay, so thank you. That answers my question. That was just implied at the last board meeting. The second question I have for you is, when you're doing the volunteer application, the training, is the question asked either when they volunteer for a particular school or as they're going through their training, is the question asked if a situation arises where there's a conflict of, well, we don't have a policy that covers it, where there's a conflict of relationship. If you're volunteering for, so for instance, I went on a field trip where the principal took her husband as a chaperone. My children have gone on trips where a teacher took her husband as a chaperone. Is there questions asked in the mentor training or the application process when they're applying for a particular school? Are you a relative of the person that you're wanting to volunteer for? Is that question asked?
So are you asking if there's a box to check? Or
Yes, ma'am.
There is not.
Okay.
All volunteers are told that they, again, are under the ultimate supervision of the administrator or the principal of the school.
Perfect. I just needed that for the next part. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Ms. Yadko. I'm sorry, Ms. Cherry, I didn't.
Ms. Yadko, you kept saying that they go to an orientation. Is that required, and do you check a box off that they did go? What if they don't go to the orientation?
All right. When they come to orientation, there are sign-in sheets, so we have record and a signature that they have attended. After the orientation, I actually take that sheet and I put a date on their volunteer application. The way our database is designed, actually when the principal pulls up their list, and again, as I said, the principal accepts all applications, the principal will only see the applications for their school. But if they have not attended a volunteer orientation, the name is actually highlighted in the system. So that immediately, and again, complimenting the principals and administrators of our school, they are very vigilant in looking at that, and oftentimes we'll send out an email to say, we need you to complete the last step.
Ms. Yadko, thank you. We'll let Mr. Duncan come talk about volunteer coach process.
Good evening, Chairman Collier, Vice Chairman Ramsey, rest of the board, and Superintendent Booker. Okay, I also want to say how thankful we are to have many of our volunteer coaches out there. And you see listed in front of you, we have 98 currently, at 50 at the high school and 48 at the middle school. And these people work tirelessly, obviously don't get paid, are assisting our schools, our coaches, and definitely our student athletes, and it is truly appreciated. I wanted to show you the process that we have. Obviously, they will go to our main website, They hit departments, and then they go to athletics. Once they do that, and you will see at the bottom left of this slide the volunteer coaches button that they would need to hit. They hit that, and volunteer coaches pops up, and you see in number 1 the exact same website that Ms. Yatko just spoke about. They would obviously have to go through and complete all of that information. We also ask that they print and complete the required health form signed by a doctor. And then we also ask in the third step, which I'm going to go through these steps a lot more in depth, that they send me an email or call me to let me know that I need to then send them the rest of the orientation and everything else that comes with it. So did want to also explain, though, the bottom 2 points on this. I know it's kind of small on the screen. The completion of all of these steps is required before they can attend one practice. 1 second of one practice. So we need to make sure we know who's on our fields, courts, whatever. And the second point is all coaches have to have this, okay? They have to have the badge. And that's what I'll tell them all the time when I see them, is they have to have the badge to be eligible to coach. The page, again, where they register to log in, and if they're a new volunteer, you see there's a specific spot for them to then press on there. Here is the health certificate that they will need completed by a doctor. It also says either that or physician's assistant or nurse practitioner, but this health certificate has to be completed, and then it is submitted to our Human Resources office, and the day that they take it to the Human Resources office, Human Resources is then going to tell them they need to go to the lab to be drug tested. All right, so there's added things going on here. Another step that they'll have to do is, like I said, they have to notify me that they are interested in this, so that'll come through. And I will then send them this whole big packet that Human Resources has helped me, and Ms. Yatko has helped me to try to come up with all of this, and I'm going to go through it here in a second, but it's through AppleTrack, which is what all of our employees also use. They have to complete all the sections. Every section has an electronic signature and a timestamp to show when it was completed and that they agree to all of this. And then once all this is completed, the information is sent to not only Human Resources, but back to me and also to the school principal. I wanted to show you some also additional slides. You've already seen the presentation that Ms. Yatko had. We have some additional slides in our volunteer coach orientation. Obviously, the principal is going to be notified by the athletic director at the school or the coach, one of the coaches at the school, that this person is interested, and then also that principal, AD, coach can all interview that hopeful volunteer coach. The protocol, again, they cannot attend practices or games without the completion of this whole protocol, and no badge means no practice, and that is constantly reiterated to them. We also have liability reminders for them, volunteer coaches, all times, under sight and sound of GCS employed coaches while on practice fields, gymnasiums, or other athletic venues. Volunteer coaches should not drive or transport any student athlete. Volunteer coaches should not be in locker rooms or shower areas with student athletes. Volunteer coaches should not be in possession of any school-issued keys. And another big one, volunteer coaches may not substitute for employed coaches or hold practices, games, or competitions without the presence of a Gaston County Schools employed team coach or Gaston County Schools administrator. And then we also tell them anything specific to their site, they need to meet with the athletic director. A lot of times this is going to have to do with the emergency action plans, but it could be anything else that has to do with that particular site. That was the first part. And again, it has to be an electronic signature and time-stamped that they've seen that whole orientation piece. The next piece is bloodborne pathogens. They have to watch a 30-minute video, and then they have to answer 20 questions. And again, once they've completed that, it's electronically signed, and there's a timestamp to that. And then they also have to electronically sign and timestamp the drug-free workplace handbook. All right, this is a a 14-page document that has to be gone through, and they have to say that they've gone through it. So again, this process with human resources, and this is kind of stuff that I've already talked about just in the past few minutes. The demographic information is collected. Volunteer coach orientation presentation is viewed and acknowledged. Bloodborne pathogens awareness videos watched, and knowledge is assessed by a quiz. The drug-free workplace handbook is provided. And then I said before that health examination certificate has to be brought physically to human resources and dropped off at that front desk. Okay? And then they will be told they have to, the next part, they will then be sent to the drug screening that same day. All right? And again, they also, at that time, since we don't want to make them have to go multiple times back and forth, they'll get their picture done. They will not get the badge, but they'll get their picture completed while they're at Human Resources. The third step, obviously, if the drug screen is clear, they will be notified, this is the hopeful volunteer coach, by the principal that they've been approved to be a volunteer coach. It could be from me also. They will then be sent to pick up their volunteer badge, and that'll come from me. Explain that here in just a second. So again, they had their picture taken at Human Resources. Human Resources approved or denied all submitted tasks. If it's approved, Human Resources then will notify the principal and myself. And Human Resources will then send me the badge. And that way I will then notify the volunteer coach that the badge is ready. Once I do that, I will meet with them. Most of the time, it's right out here in this front lobby. Instead of them coming downstairs where I'm located, I will meet with them. I will talk to them about several different points that are on the orientation slide, especially with all of our liability things. And I'll remind them that they're in the kid business, that they need to make sure that they see, hear anything going on, that they are to notify an adult. If the head coach does something, then they need to notify the athletic director. If the AD does something, they need to notify the principal, and they can notify all of them. So again, those are some of the points that I make sure I bring up to them. I also wanted to bring up to you all of our coaches, what they must do here in Gaston County. Right around the time of August 1st, we have our huge coaches meeting. The last 3 years it's been at Stuart Kramer. If they cannot attend that meeting, which has been between an hour and 45 minutes and 2 hours every year, if they cannot attend that meeting, they are to watch it on video, which our communications department helps me with. And with that video, they also have questions that they have to answer. And obviously, that component helps to prove that they have seen and understand our rules and expectations. They also have the coach's guideline sheet, which is a 7-page document. And they sign that they understand and will abide by our coach's guidelines. All of them have to sign off on Gefeller-Waller concussion sheets. Obviously, that's state law. And they also have to complete the yearly bloodborne pathogens question and answer sheet. Our high school coaches have to complete fundamentals of coaching. That's on that website, nfhslearn.com. That's National Federation of High Schools. They have to do that one time in their coaching career. Yearly, though, all high school coaches have to complete the concussions in sport component. And depending upon if they're volunteer or if they're paid, this is all from the High School Athletic Association. If they're volunteer, they complete the sudden cardiac arrest component. If they are paid, they have to complete AED CPR certification. And then obviously the head coach will have to then attend a rule session with the High School Athletic Association. A lot of times that's in Greensboro, but they also might have a satellite location they can attend. Our middle school coaches, the head coach is to meet with the local assigner of officials. We have a meeting before the season starts for every one of our sports. And all middle school coaches are strongly encouraged to go to that same website, nfhslearn.com, and complete any of the following, and these are all free. Concussion in sport, heat illness prevention, fundamentals of coaching, is not free, that's $35. and sudden cardiac arrest component, or they can also be AED CPR certified. So here is what we have. This is basically similar to what Valerie, Ms. Yetko brought up earlier. You have your volunteers, what they do, and then to the right you see the added things added on there with the health form, the drug test, bloodborne pathogens, drug-free workplace. That is what is added. And we also wanted to show you this is what the principal access will look like when all of those applications might come in, and you see the principal can accept and approve their volunteer applications on this site. All right? And again, our expectation is that a volunteer is under sight, sound, and supervision of the GCS staff member. Thank you.
Mr. Howell.
Mr. Duncan, same question for you that I asked for Ms. Yadko. In any of your volunteer presentation for coaches, your coaches clinic meeting that you did the past 3 years at Stuart Kramer, at any point in there when a head coach is bringing you a volunteer staff member and saying, I want this guy to be my volunteer staff, is the question asked, is this person a brother, sister, mother, father, stepson, stepdaughter? Is that question asked in a box checked or not checked?
No.
Okay, second question is, in your tenure as the athletic director, because this will help me in our next agenda item, in your tenure as athletic director, has there been a volunteer family member, brother, sister, mother, sister, cousin, whatever the case might be, according to what is classified as family and policy 7105, has there been an incident with a family member that Gaston County Schools or yourself had to ask that family member to step away from the sport? Is there a recollection that you have of that?
I don't believe so.
Thanks, sir.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Mr. Clinton, have you got anything to add to this presentation?
Well, I was just here because Human Resources does help make sure that all of our volunteer coaches do come in and go through the process with the bloodborne pathogen. They complete the health certificate, and we give them information regarding that because it is a cost associated with that. And we have a partnership with New Hope Medical Clinic to get a reduced rate for the coaches. And we trigger a lot of the information that goes to Mr. Duncan and to the school principals once the volunteer coach brings the information back to us.
Okay. Any other questions or comments about volunteers? Seeing none, we're going to move to the next agenda item, Policy 7105, Employment and Supervision of Relatives and Other Related Policies. And this was a segue with the volunteer policy into this agenda item, and I'm just going to open the board up for a conversation on the policy now. Mr. Howell.
I'll lead it off. Based on what we've heard today in our public comment, public expression from some DPI standards, looking over those sporadically during the board meeting, based on what we've heard from Ms. Yatko and Mr. Duncan, based on our volunteer recruitment, based on what I read in policy 5010, 5020, and 7100, I do not see where 7105 involves volunteers. This was the thing at the work session that we discussed, that we tried to get into, where we were defining what a volunteer is. I look at that and I hear the people that have stepped to that mic to talk about how important it is to have a volunteer in our schools, how needed they are, that there's 2,300 current volunteers in there. And I understand that if we enlist a volunteer that is a family member, I'm assuming because we have an implied tier level, that it doesn't apply to the classroom, but it applies to the athletic field. It doesn't apply to arts, but it applies to the athletic court, which I do not understand. I understand there might be a hesitation based on maybe some sexual or physical misconduct because they're a family member, we don't report it. Maybe there's some, I don't know what the hesitation is because I don't have it. But I've watched assistant coaches that aren't family members, that are paid or not paid, stand on our sidelines of our football fields and spit their chewing tobacco out on the field. So they're not following Gaston County Schools policy on a tobacco-free environment. And they're not reprimanded from that by the head coach, the AD, or anybody else. I've watched our coaches and some ADs turn their head when a head sport coach, and I'll just leave it at that, opts to sell stuff out of their classroom after they've been told not to do that. And so we're saying that we don't want volunteers that are family members because they might go above and beyond the bounds of allowing a family member to do something. So therefore, we're not going to let them coach or volunteer to coach. But yet we're allowing non-family members to do things that are against our policy. So according to the words of our superintendent in our last meeting, that we want to be fair and consistent. Let's either fix every policy that we have and fire every employee that we have that violates policy, or reprimand them, or let's at least make it black and white and not implied. We said in our last meeting that there were tier levels and a volunteer was implied. Now we're asking central office to define and interpret what that means. That is this board's job. And this board has should have zero tolerance for allowing somebody else to interpret our policies. So it is my opinion that we should allow volunteers to coach because, as we see in the volunteer policy, they are in direct supervision of a Gaston County Schools employee and overall an AD and a principal. And so if our ADs and principals are hiring coaches that they don't trust to supervise their volunteers, maybe we need to talk to our ADs and our principals about who they hire to be coaches. We should not penalize the kids, the sport, the families, the school, because we can't figure out what our policy says.
Ms. Roberts?
Okay, to me, the policy is already black and white when it says employee, and I'm still not understanding how it was interpreted to include volunteer. But with that being said, between public expression tonight and presentations, we've heard the terms community support and the term volunteer multiple times tonight. And as I had mentioned in our work session, it's hard to understand how our system can run day to day without our volunteers, and we appreciate them so much. I do understand some hesitation. I understand where this opinion's coming from with head coaches having family members as assistant coaches. I know we're all worried about the safety of the students. We worry about that whether they're related or not, to be quite honest. We see it every day in the headlines. A compromise to me would be if we have hesitation, then we just say, hey, this athletic director needs to pay more attention because there is a relationship there. To me, volunteers need to be consistent throughout the county. So, okay, if a teacher has their mother-in-law, another family member come into that classroom, do you have hesitation about that? Let's have the principal or AP have an eye on them. But we need these volunteers. Unfortunately, hiring employees these days is getting tough. It's hard just to find teachers. So we're begging for teachers and we're begging for volunteers too. And I think we need to do whatever we can to help this transition smoothly and to let our volunteers feel welcome and let them be able to help out where they can. Thank you.
Ms. Cherry?
Okay. I'm going to go back to what Ms. Jatko said. She used the definition, and she used the mentors as the example that they are, for lack of a better word, a different tier than the average volunteer. Coaches are a different tier than the average volunteer. In my opinion, for this reason, they're the only volunteer that I can think of, and there probably are others, I'm just not thinking, that go off campus continually with children, whether it be, you know, out of town or across town in buses. They're in the locker rooms after school when administrators might be gone. It's not that I don't trust them, but most of our volunteers, and Valerie, please correct me if I'm wrong, for the most part, are in our schools during the school day when administration, teachers the school is full. So I do consider them different. Where I'm having a hard time is if we keep the policy as it is, what's the difference in the nepotism with the coach and father-daughter, whatever, and a volunteer father-daughter, whatever? They're still relatives, and they're still coaches. So that's where my issue is. How can you say we have this policy for just regular coaches, and I'm not talking about ADs, I'm just talking about coaches and then assistant coaches that are paid, and we have a totally different policy for volunteers. They're all coaches. But I do consider them a different type of volunteer, just because of the time that they spend with the children and the time of day or night that they are spending with the kids, personally.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Devon.
First of all, I really like all our procedures. I think we have really good procedures that are put in place to keep our children safe, and I really appreciate that. That's a really good thing to have. I think this whole thing boils down to in my personal opinion, that we're really dragging this thing out. The bottom line is, are we going to allow coaches to have their son, daughter coach with them and be part of the policy of nepotism? You know, I'm inclined to say, let them coach, let the athletic director, and keep all of our procedures as we have them, but take the nepotism out and let the people coach with their uncle, their father, their brother. Let the athletic director and the principal work out the rest of it. That's where I stand on that. So, am I off base there, Ms. Cherry, or you?
That's where my issue is, because how can you say one group, you've got a nepotism policy.
Well, I think you need to make it for everything else. I think we need to decide on the coaching thing right now. I think that, we don't need to, this does not need to apply to our volunteers. That's just where I stand.
Well, what we're here tonight is to decide if we need to change the wording in the policy or add any words or language to the policy. To clear up these questions. It's obvious a lot of people disagree with interpretations and what's happened so far this year.
If we do it like the sibling policy, it'll be about 3 or 4, I'll be off the board by the time we do it, so we might need to do action a little quicker than that.
Okay, Mr. Howell.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to make a motion that we take policy 7105 and we take it and interpret it as written, that 7105 applies the nepotism to employees and not volunteers. That volunteers they're defined one way, employees are defined one way, according to our own policies in North Carolina DPI. So I'm making a motion that we take 7105, we set the definition of employee as North Carolina DPI outlines it, and our volunteers, whether family or not, are allowed to assist in that if approved by administration.
Okay, motion by Mr. Howell. Do you need to repeat
Ms.
that, Ms.
Finger,
Salata?
can I say something before I second the motion? Ms. Finger, is this the one, Ms. Finger, Ms. McGraw? Golly. I know. Well, we've changed attorneys quickly, but that was fast. This is the one he's talking about right here.
So you received policy 7100 and policy 7105 in draft form, and I added to each one of those this line. This policy applies or does not apply to volunteers, and I just need this board to tell us which.
All right, so Mr. Howe, your motion was the policy would not apply to volunteers.
Policy does not apply to volunteers.
I'll second that, sir.
A second by Mr. Dedman. Discussion.
Well, my question is, are we going to write another policy concerning volunteers, coaching volunteers?
This policy, the way the motion is presented right now, will allow nepotism will not apply to volunteer coaches.
But everything else will be the same, which we have great procedures for everything else that we have.
I'll go ahead and just weigh in. I don't think you can group them all together when you're trying to apply nepotism policies. And I may be the only one on this board, but I don't think, and there's been cases, and I know under interrogation Mr. Duncan didn't know of any cases, where two brothers are the only two people, one paid and one unpaid, left at a ball field after 5 o'clock p.m. is not the best situation for the children in this county. And what we do here is to try to make sure we protect our children and look after the best interests of our children. And two family members is not always the best situation. Now, we have some incredible situations where we have two family members who are doing incredible jobs. But to allow it flatline completely across the board opens up a box of liability, in my opinion, we don't need to go down. And so my opinion is nepotism policy should apply to volunteer coaches. Everyone else should be excluded.
Hey, let's vote.
Ms. Cherry, first Ms. Cherry and then Mr. Howe.
And that's where I was going when I was saying that I think that volunteer coaches are in a different category because of the after-school activities. And that's exactly where I was going. And bottom line, most of us are all rule followers, but there's always that one. That's why we have policies. That's why we have rules. And so I agree with you.
Mr. Howe?
I appreciate your comment on rule following, because some of our paid coaching staff don't follow the same rules. We can take it offline. I'll tell you exactly who they are. They may not like it, but I have to follow rules, so do they. How far is it from here to San Diego, California, or here to New York City? I would say that it's an 11-hour drive ride to New York City. I would say that it's a 2.5-day drive ride to San Diego. Yet we have teachers that take their students there, and they have their spouse volunteer as a chaperone, which according to this board is not a different tier level. It doesn't exist, it's implied. And they walk around with a group of students, the two of them together. We have teachers, a principal at a local school that I went with that took their students to Old Salem and had their spouse walk around with that group of kids. That's off campus. Not only is it off campus, but it's at a remote location and sometimes multiple states away. And we say that we trust them, but we don't trust a coach. I'm going to go ahead and go out on a limb and say that some of the most integrity that we have in our school system is in a coaching staff. That you can find more integrity in a coaching staff sometimes than you can find anywhere else in this county. And to be able to say that we don't trust them, let the volunteer coach drive his own car to the game, let him drive his own car back. Don't let him ride on the bus, I'm fine with that. Let the athletic director and the administrator, which the policy says, to supervise that, let them supervise that. If Johnny and Mike are going to be at the ball field by themselves with a student, then there ought to be somebody there because they know of the situation. But why in the world would we penalize our students and our athletic programs because we decided that academics is more important than athletics? You know what? To some students, that's not the case. To some parents, that's not the case. East Gaston was a prime example of that. So, and I find it rather redundant and ridiculous that we're even having this discussion and that there's somebody who's weighing in on both sides when that same somebody's the one that brought it to the county. It wasn't even an issue till somebody brought it here, and it was a board member. Yet that same board member is weighing in that I'm for this, I'm not for that. I wish we'd just go ahead and put it on the table and be real and quit talking around in circles. You can wrinkle your eyes, but you know what I'm talking about.
Mr. Ramsey.
Well, first of all, we all appreciate our volunteers across the board. We don't function without the volunteers. And we love our coaches and the people that are helping and supporting our system. But second of all, we're responsible for your children. At the end of the day, we're responsible. Yeah, are we perfect, Chris? Absolutely not. Do we have improvement? Absolutely. But it's hard for me to think that people after hours, the travels and all that we don't have no supervision there. And that worries me. I mean, I'm not an if person because if is going to happen no matter what. But also, I can't sit here and raise my hand right now and say that it. And then also, legally, I was going to get our opinion or our, not Miss Fingers, Miss McGraw, and see what her weigh-in is on this too. Is this open us up for a lawsuit? And of course, we can be sued for anything. We know that. But also, I just want all of us to take a deep breath there and not make a irrational decision tonight, if anything, and figure out what we can do. I think there's a compromise there. I see both sides of it, that we've all talked about it, and I looked at it both ways, and I still think there's a
reasonable way to fix this problem. And like, I agree with a lot of y'all's comments, and I agree with some of these comments. But I'm not there tonight to raise my hand one way or the other, but I'd like to get my opinion from our attorney.
Mr. Ramsey, I would say to you and to the rest of the board that this is a decision that is clearly within the purview of this board. And the staff looks to you for direction on how to proceed. As far as risk is concerned, that seems to be your question about liability. Certainly, we will put procedures in place to try to keep our children as safe as we can, and the adults who are with those children safe as well, free from any accusations that might become unfounded. It's easier for staff to implement those procedures, and there is less risk involved when we don't have family relationships. I believe that's why you find nepotism policies in employee situations. So it just seemed a natural transition that we would treat those positions similarly to our paid employees for those risk reasons. Now, having said that, this staff will do what this board directs in carrying out its wishes. But I think you've hit on the issue. Either these policies apply to volunteers in all capacities, or it applies to volunteers in certain capacities. And again, that's for this board to determine.
Yeah, but I'm not a lawyer.
But so it's a board decision. There's nothing in the law that's going to give you the answer to this. It's not against the law for you to say the nepotism policy applies, and it's not against the law for you to say the nepotism policy doesn't apply. In volunteer situations.
And I want to point out, we do have a nepotism policy for employees, and that's not required by the state, that we have a local nepotism policy. But I think it's a smart one to have. Applying it to volunteer coaches to see what volunteer coaches have to go through. They go through every step just like an employee, and I was really happy to see that. You know, when we're trying to look after our children and look after the best interest of protecting them, I was really happy to see all the steps that a volunteer coach has to go through. And I hate to say it this way, but you know, they're treated like an applicant for a job, for an employee. They're just not paid in the end. Now, this board appreciates its volunteers. I can tell you that. We really appreciate the volunteers. There's just not, as a uniform policy, in my opinion, and I'm just one board member here, to apply across the board when it comes to coaches, that a nepotism, wide open, no nepotism policy that is in the best interest across the county. It's been successful in some places, but there's a nepotism policy for a reason, and when it comes to volunteer coaches who shows up on a field every day, not a field trip, not a single day in a classroom, not one weekend, this is every day they show up on a field or travel and play games. This is an entire season. So I do see coaches as a different category, clearly, than any other volunteers. Mr. Dedman.
All right, clearly now, the only thing, we're not changing any procedures other than we are allowing, or I'm going to vote for, and the motion he made is that it will not apply to volunteer coaches. Is that correct? Everything else is the same. Is that
The motion
correct,
that's on the
Ms.
floor will allow
McGraw?
nepotism. Nepotism will not apply to
Just to volunteer coaches.
any volunteer. No, to no volunteers. Period. That includes volunteer coaches. The nepotism policy will not apply on the motion on the floor. Am I correct, Ms. McGraw?
That's right, we have a motion and a second.
Call the
Are
question.
you clear? The policy on the floor
Yeah, we're clear. Let's
says
call
that the
question.
nepotism policy will not apply
Got you.
to all volunteers, including coaching volunteers. It will not apply to them.
Call the
Okay.
question.
Yeah, any more? I haven't heard from some board members.
I'm calling the question.
But
I mean,
I'm
that's-
not allowing it. I want to make sure I hear from all the board members that want to speak. Ms. Guthrie.
Mr. Chair, I am sitting here trying to fully understand the decision that I will make. I'm certainly, there is a difference between volunteers in the classroom and volunteers on the football field. But I tell you, we cannot do without either. And certainly, every school appreciates every helping hand, whether it's in the classroom or whether it's on the football field. But I strongly believe that we should modify the recommendation that's been, the motion that's been made. I'm not saying that it's going to happen over an extended period of time, but we need to give more thought to this. This is something serious. And I'm not going to be rushed into something that I don't have my heart in, although I certainly believe in my volunteers, whether, like I said earlier, but just for the sake of rushing into something just to satisfy, I don't believe in that. So I am going to, at this time, ask that we modify, and if we can't do that, then you don't have my vote.
Any other comments or questions? Seeing none, I'm going to call for the vote. All those in favor of Mr. Howell's recommendation? Do we need to read the motion again? Okay, let's read the motion again, Ms. Luato.
The motion is that nepotism will not apply to all volunteers, including coaches.
Okay. All right. All those in favor of the motion, show by raising your hand. That's 3. Those that oppose, show by raising your hand. And that's in 5 in opposition. The motion fails. Do we want to talk about modifying the language? Because I see I am as frustrated as a lot of parents that are here tonight, because it sounds like they need to apply it unilaterally to all volunteers, which it is not. And so I think we need to clean language up, is my opinion. And I understand we can't get that done tonight. We're going to have a first reading anytime we change the policy. They'll have recommendations other than what I've put out there that the board can agree on.
That, for lack of a better term, that we could make an athletic or a volunteer coach arm to this? That you know, a branch of this policy that just deals with volunteer coaches?
And I'm sorry, Ms. Cherry, what would it say? I'm going to let Ms. Guthrie weigh in.
May I try to maybe
Go ahead,
help
Donna.
out? Mr. Duncan, I think, and Ms. Yatko, we need to look at the models that they have, that they presented to us, based on the volunteers, and see if we can't come up with 1 or 2 things that can be modified or added to that in order to, and we're not calling it a tier, but in order to make the suggestions to modify. That make sense?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Dedman.
Can I ask Mr. Booker a question? Mr. Booker, in the since you've been superintendent here, how many incidents with volunteer coaches have we had versus with regular teachers or teacher assistants or principals, or just curious? I mean, is there a definite number that these people have done something illegal or wrong or anything?
There's not a definitive number. When we're dealing with a coach issue, the question comes into the action of the coach.
See, I don't have a problem with what you're all talking about, but I don't think you understand where I'm coming from or where Chris is coming from. You know, this is being blown out of proportion over nepotism and a coach. And I do want to take with Chris, in my years as principal, I never saw, when I saw a coach spit tobacco juice, I said something to him. I'm disappointed that you didn't say something to the principal. But if it's your job to sit here and talk about it, it's your job to say something about it too. But I have no problem letting them bring something back, but I like all the procedures that we have. The procedures are good, okay? We're just getting hung up on afraid to let somebody volunteer coach because their cousin or their, I mean, I think we're nitpicking, but that's just me. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Dedman, I agree, and that has been blown way out of proportion, but we're being asked to define our policy, and I think we need to. Well, there's a lot of people do not understand the way that it's been interpreted, and this is my opinion, that we apply nepotism to volunteer coaches and not to the rest of the volunteers. And I'm fine with that as a procedure, but if we need to write that down to clear that up, then I'm willing to write that down and clear it up. And to your point, I think the protocol and procedures we have in place for what our volunteers have to go through and our coaches speaks to your very point. We don't have problems, or knock on wood, we've had very few incidences because of what we have in place to get volunteers on our sidelines and on our courts and gyms. So I'm very happy with what we're doing, and that speaks to itself, the lack of incidents. But Mr. Howell.
Mr. Collier, in all due respect, you make no sense. You say, I'm very happy with what we have because we have no incidences, but yet I want to make sure that we don't allow nepotism in coaching. To me, the issue tonight is 7105, according to our attorney's drafts. Paragraph 1 under general principles, last sentence says this policy applies or does not apply to volunteers, saying that the attorney believes that there is not a clear definition of what this policy says. So for this board to walk away tonight and not define this policy is an injustice to the people who voted us into office. And with all due respect, Ms. Guthrie said that she needs time to get her head around this. We talked about this at the last board meeting and said that we would bring it up at this board meeting. And with all due respect, I'm not bashing you, so please don't take it that way.
Not received that way.
But for us to walk away tonight and not apply or does not apply, to not define this policy, that is weak leadership and this board not doing its job. So I'm asked that we don't walk away without defining the policy. Otherwise, we're leaving it to staff for interpretation, and it's not their job.
Well, first, Mr. Howell, if you weren't paying attention to the slides, there are different types of volunteers. The characteristics are significantly different. And that was very, very clear to me. And I think that was very clear to the rest of this board, the different types of volunteers we have in the schools. I've made a recommendation. I'm just waiting for the rest of the board to see if they can agree to a recommendation that I have to clearly define the policy. I understand the hesitancy amongst a couple board members that may need more time to digest this. But back to your point, it is policy 7105. It isn't all the other noise that's being said. And it's whether nepotism applies to volunteer coaches or not, in my opinion, is what we're down to. Because we don't apply it to all volunteers, and so if we're defining the language, it's just as simple as, does nepotism policy apply to volunteer coaches or not?
Which, Mr. Chair, is my point. If we're not applying it today according to 7105 as it is written to all volunteers, then we're wrong. 7105 does not say academic volunteer, it does not say athletic volunteer, it does not say mentor, it does not say board volunteer, it does not say administrative volunteer. It says 7105 employee.
Mr. Howell, I'm going to repeat my recommendation. I'm going to repeat my recommendation one more time, that we change the language.
I'm going to ask you to make that in the form of a motion, get a second, let's vote it in.
Okay. Does everybody understand the motion? All right.
Where you go ahead.
It's going to probably require more language than just simply saying that the nepotism policy applies to volunteer coaches. And the nepotism policy does not apply to any other volunteers. That's going to require more language. But my motion is to direct staff to put in the language to where nepotism policy applies to volunteer coaches and nepotism policy does not apply to any other volunteers. And that's volunteer athletic coaches. That would be fine.
Please define 7105 tonight for us.
Mr. Howell, you heard my motion to this board, and I'm not here to debate you tonight anymore on this.
I'm not here to debate you, I'm saying 7105.
You want me to read it to you, Mr. Howell?
Please do.
I am making a recommendation to change the policy tonight. I am not keeping the policy. My recommendation is to send staff to change the language of the policy.
If we don't change it tonight, we keep it. That's what I'm trying to tell you. If we don't change it tonight, we keep it. It says employee unless you're inserting volunteer.
Do you have a,
Is it implied or unimplied?
Mr. Howe, we're going to put this in writing to where it's not implied, sir.
I'm understanding that, but what is the policy defined as tonight? That is a fair question.
You read it, Mr. Howe.
Okay, so then volunteers and coaching staff and within the school are allowed to participate if approved by administration. Thank you.
Okay, my motion is to instruct staff to craft the policy 7105 to where nepotism applies to volunteer athletic coaches, and that nepotism policy does not apply to any other volunteers. And I had a motion by Mr. Moore, a second by Mr. Ramsey. Discussion or questions?
Okay.
Mr. Devon.
I agree with everybody here, and I don't really understand exactly what you're saying. We're not doing it, we're not helping the kids by spending this time doing this. You're saying nepotism is gonna count for the coaches, okay, but not for the rest of the people.
That's correct.
I still think it ought to be a separate policy. Because this is
And I'm not an attorney and about to try to craft policy language here tonight. That's why I'm sending it to staff.
Mr. Attorney, Ms. McGraw, can we get sued for
Mr. Howe.
by applying that to one group of people and not applying to another?
No, but, you know, this, as I understand the motion, nepotism policy applies to volunteer athletic coaches. It does not apply to other types of coaches, types of volunteers. That's what I've written.
Okay, is everybody clear on the motion and the second? All right, all those in favor of the motion and the second, show by raising your hand.
So the favor,
That's fine.
to go back to staff to let them write this in.
Yes, sir, that is correct. All right.
Because we're not getting anywhere the way we're going.
That's 6-4. Those against, raise your hand, and that's 2 against. The motion carries. Staff will go back and craft new policy for 7105, including language where nepotism applies to volunteer coaches, but the nepotism policy does not apply to any other volunteers. Thank you. The next item on the board agenda is the consent agenda. I need a motion. Motion by Ms. Guthrie, a second by Ms. Cherry. Any discussion or questions? All those in favor, show by raising your hand, and the consent agenda is passed. All right, the next item on the agenda is superintendent's comments.
Thank you, members of the board. October is a month that a lot of positive recognitions go on in your school system. It is National School Bus Safety Week. It's the time where we pause and remind folks about the rules in riding around our buses, and that when arms are out that we stop because children are moving. And we also support and acknowledge the hard work of our bus drivers. It's also National School Lunch Week, where we celebrate all the hard work done by our cafeteria workers as they support the education that goes on in our schools every day. And then lastly, we include the National Principals Month. And this is where we recognize our principals and assistant principals and thank them for all that they do. All of these combined reflect the employees that you have working with children every day. And it's just nice that in October we stop and thank them for all that they do to contribute to the success of our district. As we look back at last week, I want to thank parents for a couple of events. We had a great parent advisory council meeting at Pleasant Ridge Elementary. It was an opportunity to just meet with parents, update them on the progress in the district. But we also broke out into sessions and got input from the parents about what they ranked as our facility and capital needs. And it was great. And they also gave us written questions and comments that we then took time to try and answer and engage with this. It was very appreciative, over 200 parents in the comments that we got. So we appreciate that participation. And then on Thursday, we had our parent-teacher conferences. Again, We appreciate all that our schools and teachers do to host those conferences and be prepared. Those conferences are important. First 9 weeks behind, it gives parents an opportunity to interact with their teacher, the child, and just learn about what is going on in our schools. If you are unable to make it, parents, please don't hesitate. Our schools are glad to schedule a conference for you at another date. I also would like to recognize Highland School of Technology. You may have heard that they were awarded the National Blue Ribbon School. That award will be held the first week in November in Washington, D.C., and then we'll bring them to you, to the board, so that you can see the nice recognition that they receive in D.C. and the different trinkets that they get to bring back. But it is exciting, recognizing there were only 6 schools in the state of North Carolina to get that designation, and just over 300 in the entire country. So it's great work and shows what continues to go on at the Highland School of Technology. Mr. Chairman, we've had a long meeting, so I'll stop there and thank you for what you all have done to contribute to what has been a great start to a great school year. And I do ask that we have a closed session to discuss a couple
Mr. Booker, I've just been instructed by the attorney that we do not have a need to have a closed session tonight.
Well, she's got that one then. That's great.
Okay. And so with that, need a motion to adjourn. Mr. Dedman, second by Ms. Cherry. All those in favor, show by raising your hand. And we are adjourned.